Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you so very much for your patience. One of the things I think we learned during COVID. So thank you so very much. My name is Monica Cost. I will be your MC. I am the president of the Core Value Company and the founder of our flagship program, the Good Old Girls Network. And I'm so excited to be here with you this morning and throughout the day. You know, nothing brings people together like food. I mean, maybe Boston traffic, but we're going to stick to food today. So thank you for being here. We are going to get right into it. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today. And before we get to that programming, I would like to introduce one of the founders of the dinner group, Emerson Foster, if you would come to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. And again, I know this morning for the travelers, and it was a little arduous, I think, getting through the traffic from what I understand. So thank you, Monica, for kicking us off real quick. We're going to be really quick with the opening. I want to get to the program, and we have a tight timeline. And again, I do want to apologize for the badging. It's something that we're still working through, and bear with us. It takes a village to put these things on, and we all have day jobs, and we're all trying to work through that. So, give us some grace, and we'll get it right as we move forward. So, dinner group, we've been around for a little while. For those of you who are new to the group, go online, and you can see kind of all the information of the group. It's really about connecting us, getting us in a room together, and building relationships. So, hopefully, you're able to do that this morning and this afternoon. We have sponsors that we're very, very grateful that they've continue to support the dinner group. This is a free event, and you couldn't do that without sponsors really supporting you and pouring into you. So we really, really appreciate those sponsors. They'll be here with career tables. Make sure you engage them and check out some of the great opportunities of some of these leading companies in the region, okay? So have a great day. Engage, connect, network, listen to some good music by my guy, Joe Peters. And I hope you enjoy yourself this morning and this afternoon. I do want to say, we've had a couple dinner group members that are not with us anymore, unfortunately. Flash Wiley was really an important part of the dinner group. If you know anything about the history of the dinner group, he was a central figure within the group. Jeff Rogers, we lost recently as well. Want to recognize Jeff. And we also want to recognize our brother, Ray Blount, who suffered a pretty serious accident recently and is recovering. So we send our prayers out to him and his family and for a speedy recovery. All right, thank you all.
Next, I'd like to introduce the Trailblazer Awards. And the Trailblazer Awards is an annual award given to those in our community that are opening a path for the development and progression of people of color and our community. I would like to, this year's awardees are Dr. Keith Motley, Dr. Joan Reed, Rob Perez, and Dr. Cynthia Orellana. Indeed. I would like to invite Dr. Stephen Neville to the stage, who will present the award to Dr. Motley.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning. As you heard, my name is Steve Neville. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Inclusive Excellence here at Umass Boston. I'm also a Baptist preacher. So that 2-minute time limit is in jeopardy. But what I do want to say is that, as a preacher, I am a believer in the presence of our Creator in all things. And 50 years ago, our Creator reached down to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and attracted Keith Motley to Northeastern University, that other university, as one of their first Division I athletes. And that has made a difference for Massachusetts. It's made a difference for Boston. It's made a difference for the university community, of which many of us are a part and many of us have come through. It's made a difference for our communities and our communities of color, and it's made a difference for me. And I know that it's made a difference for many of you, because in Dr. Keith Motley, the Creator has brought us a different kind of leader, a leader that leads with love, that leads with care, that leads with character, a leader that keeps showing up. And I know for the generation that knows him as Dean Motley, and for the generation that knows him as Chancellor Motley, we are happy, so very happy, that the Creator brought Dr. Keith Motley here to Massachusetts to touch the many dimensions of our communities that make us and make this place livable, powerful, and that has continued to touch the lives of people in very powerful ways. And I am just one of those that remains very optimistic about our future. And part of the reason I am so optimistic about our future is because we have had the influence of somebody like Dr. Keith Motley on our lives. And so, my friends, what I'd like you to do is to give a hand now as we welcome and award Dr. J. Keith Motley the Trailblazers Award.
So my glasses are down there on my, I never thought I would have to use something like that, particularly over here. But welcome to the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I am honored to have you in our presence here on campus. Thank you to the dinner group for picking a place that's dear to my heart to present an award that is also dear to my heart, but with people that are parts of my heart that I've been in this journey with for such a long time. And so I'm so grateful to you for doing that. Dr. Neville not only is a dear friend, Dr. Neville propped me up as chancellor here, as my assistant chancellor, but also he's one of my former students here at the university in his PhD program. So when he talks about love and care and all those things, he sort of knows what that means. You know, I want to also thank you for seeing this beautiful campus for what it is today. When you walk through here, I hope you said wow, but I hope you said wow because of how beautiful it is, not because you didn't expect it to be this beautiful, just because it happens to be the only public research university with a soul like this one in the city of Boston. And I have to admit publicly that I came here that way, from Northeastern. That's why they tease me about my Northeastern and Boston College pedigree. I was a private school educated person. Had no idea that public schools would change my life. How can you change the life of a man who says he loves folk endlessly anyway? First, you send him here with an incredible wife, Angela Motley, who happens to be here today with me. And secondly, he has to be humble enough to know that he needs to be recharged. And coming here was at an incredible time in my life. But I also had booster rockets along the way, like my sister, who's receiving this award with me today, Joan Reed, my brother Rob, who's sitting over there, all humble. And then when these two guys called me about a Trailblazer award, I didn't know how to take that. Because when I look in the mirror, I still see that 17-year-old man who came to Boston so many years ago. And then they told me that Cynthia was receiving this award. So I said, if she's a Trailblazer and you're putting me in that category, then I won't take it so much to heart. And I didn't jack up Paul and Emerson in a room somewhere. I let them slide because of that. But listen, I am honored. Someone, everywhere I go nowadays, people talk to me about what I think about what's going on today and what we need to do. And I was so glad when the sister was up here talking about resilience and all of that. You have the capacity to continue to move through all of this. It's in you. We've all seen it before. Some of you, woe is me. Well, you'll be telling this story about this part of your life at some point and how you were able to persevere through it, but also thrive and strive towards excellence through it as well, because that's what you're built for. And so once you understand that about yourself, and I know my wife saying, why did I even let this man have a mic? And he acted like he needed some glasses, like he was going to need, like he had some notes or something. Folks on campus know that's my MO here. He knows it because he used to try to write my speeches and it didn't work. But I just want to say thank you to the dinner group. Way back in 1989, I was talking about how we needed to come together as communities, particularly as men, to be better for our community. You have done it. You've been steadfast in your work, and I'm so proud of you. I haven't had the chance to say that publicly to you. Over the years, I sort of show up, get to your social, eat your food, and leave early. But today you made sure I had to stay a little later by slipping my girl in here on me beforehand. But listen, thank you all. So grateful to you. For those of you that got up at 8 o'clock this morning to spend your day here, that is wonderful. You're going to learn. Showing up is the biggest thing that you can do. Show up, learn something, and then take the time to share it with somebody else, okay? And then love somebody up by telling them everything that they need to hear about today, but also be there for them tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that. So thank you all. Thank you, Steve. Let's go.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Theo Hill to the stage to present to Dr. Joan Reed.
Happy October, everyone. And after that, I need to say, let the church say amen. I have the distinct honor of introducing Dr. Joan Reed. Dr. Reed serves as the Dean for Culture and Community Engagement at Harvard Medical School. Additionally, she is the President and Chair of the Biomedical Science Careers Program, or affectionately known as BSCP. Dr. Reed graduated from Brown University and additionally graduated from Mount Sinai School of Medicine. She completed her residency in pediatrics at Johns Hopkins Hospital, followed by a fellowship at Boston Children's Hospital. She holds an MPH and an MS in Health Policy Management from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Additionally, an MBA from Boston University. Dr. Reed is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and a fellow for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Dr. Reed serves as a board of directors for the AAMC and formerly served as the chair for the group at that AAMC for diversity and inclusion. In 1990, Dr. Reed founded the Harvard Medical School Minority Faculty Development Program and now serves as director for the community engagement programs therein. Dr. Reed has created more than 20 programs at Harvard Medical School that create pathways, opportunities, and a community for those who are interested in careers in medicine, academic and scientific research, as well as healthcare professions. In 1990, she founded BSCP as one of her many, many, many programs. BSCP inspires its members from every race, every background, every financial status to ask, why not me? The organization's goal is to identify, inform, mentor, and teach students who are academically outstanding to have careers in organizations such as healthcare, biopharma, professional organizations, private equity, to help them fulfill their need to have a well-rounded workforce. Since its inception, more than 18,000 fellows, students, and postdoc and professionals have come through BSCP programs. In the spirit of a true trailblazer, one of her many superpowers is opening doors. She is adept at identifying where support systems are needed and creating enduring opportunities as well as a community for all students and professionals. On a personal note, I am the benefactor of the opportunities she's created. I have a deep sense of gratitude for her and for BSCP. So please, help me welcome to the stage someone I have called a mentor, friend, and colleague, Dr. Joan Reed.
Thank you. Unlike you, these are not a prop. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Theo. It does your heart good when you are able to witness and be a part of the life of someone who starts early and grows into the kind of professional that Theo is. And it means that you're doing the right thing with your time. I want to thank the dinner group for this honor and this Trailblazer Award, and for Paul and for Emerson for even thinking of me. And I have to say, for Rob and Keith, who have both been and still are such strong supporters and members of the leadership of BSCP. It's wonderful to share the podium with them. You know, Dylan talked about resilience, and it was mentioned around this issue of how do we sustain ourselves, how do we nourish ourselves, how do we take care of ourselves, and particularly in times when they can be so challenging and seem so overwhelming. But I think about the amazing people who came before through challenges that seem in some ways much harder, much more in your face. I think about the legacy that I am a part of amazing, amazing women from individuals who were enslaved, to a grandmother who went to middle school but took care of her family and community, to a mother who graduated from this school and this campus in the year I graduated from medical school. I think about what they have taught me and given me as a gift to carry me forward that has enabled me to be where I am today. And it's about living our values and being guided by our values and a vision that what we see today does not mean that that's got to be what we see tomorrow, and how we continue to move forward. It's about vigilance. It's about saying we've come this far, but there is so much more to go, and we cannot afford to move back. We will not move back. We will not be pushed back. It's about raising our voices for ourselves, for our community, for our families, but for those who are around us who don't have opportunity, who don't have access, who have been denied. And how do we use our positions and our organizations and our privilege to help ensure others are carried forward? And it's also about recognizing our victories. We can get so caught in the negative and seeing the downside and not recognize the beauty of that walk outside that was mentioned today, or sitting next to friends who have been friends for so very long, or the new people who are parts of my life, or seeing the future in the faces of the students I get to work with. Recognize those victories, and they'll help carry us forward. So I thank the dinner group for this recognition. I thank all of the people who have joined me in this journey, but I particularly thank the ladies, and that's who I call those women who came before, who brought me here today. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now I would like to welcome Abe Cisse to the stage to present to Rob Perez.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. I want to thank the dinner group for thinking of me and to give me the opportunity to recognize a friend, a mentor, and somebody I consider a true leader in our community, in Rob Perez. Similar to Dr. Motley, many years ago, our higher power brought adopted son and brother to the Boston community. Little did we know, we also brought a Laker fan. So don't hold that against him. But as you think about Rob, I think there's many, many things that define Rob. First, I think he is known as one of the most influential and impactful leaders in our industry, in the biopharmaceutical industry in the greater Boston area. He's done that with a level of care and grace and impact that I think will be known for many, many decades from now. He built one of the most successful global biopharmaceutical businesses in Cubist Pharmaceuticals, and made impacts on many, many people, mentored many people, including myself, throughout his career, and was always selfless. But if I really take a big step back and I think about Rob's impact, I think about one word that has been used many times today, and that is the sense of community. After Rob sold Cubist to Merck, he had the opportunity to do whatever he wanted to do, truly whatever he wanted to do from an industry perspective. And what Rob chose to do was to dedicate his life to making this community better in a very real way. And he founded Life Science Cares. Life Science Cares has emerged as one of the most impactful organizations in the greater Boston area to really fight poverty. He has built a coalition across the life sciences community that has truly provided millions of dollars to our communities of need in Boston. In addition to that, he has spearheaded an organization by the name of Project On-Ramp, which has provided truly an on-ramp for hundreds of underprivileged, underrepresented students, many which come from this university, to find a way into the life science sector. It's one of the most successful sectors, as we know, in the greater Boston area. It provides so much opportunity, provides so much to this economy, and for Rob to think about the path to make sure that our community is represented in that industry was truly selfless. Not only has he done that in Boston, but he has done that now in almost every major city where biopharmaceuticals and the life science industries make an impact. And when I think about that at the end of the day, and I think about this award, that is what this award is about. It's about really extending yourself beyond what you do individually and leaving a lasting impact on the communities that you serve. And I don't think anybody, in terms of my life, has shown that better than Rob. So please welcome Rob, and please help me recognize friend, mentor, leader, and Rob with this Trailblazer Award.
Thank you, guys. I want to start with Abe. It was kind of a surprise to me to find out that Abe was presenting today, and I was so humbled that somebody who is as busy and successful and someone who I admire as much as Abe would take time to come and do this meant the world to me. So I want to start by just saying thank you to Abe for taking the time to do this. I also want to send a huge thank you. I'm so humbled, so if I'm a little tongue-tied this morning, you'll understand why. But I'm inspired by so many people, and what Paul and Emerson and the dinner group have done over the past many years. I was talking to Emerson last night and asked him how many people were at the first dinner group dinner. He said 4. Now to have this organization all over the country, and I think this is the 6th conference, is just absolutely amazing at what you've built and what you've done, and again, inspiring for someone like me to see the impact that you've made. So thank you very much, and to be honored by you is overwhelming. So just a couple of, I'll leave you with a tagline that we use at Life Science Cares. As Abe mentioned, Life Science Cares is an organization that is really trying to make a difference in the lives of people impacted by poverty in the major biopharmaceutical hubs. And we have a tagline that we just say, care actively. And when I think about our co-honorees, if you will, I'm so inspired by how you have cared actively. What we mean by care actively is, you hear the saying, if you see something, say something. But what we really mean is if you see something, do something. Because we all see needs for change in our world. And, you know, Joan, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but before I started Life Science Cares, one of the inspirations I had was being on the board of BSCP with Keith, but watching you watch BSCP grow. And I saw the pride and how inspiring it was for you to see these conferences and these dinners just grow. And I just like, I want to do that. To see the pride in your eyes of watching that grow, that was an amazing inspiration for me. And I so appreciate being able to be here in all of your presence. It means the world. So the thing I'll leave you with is, please care actively. There's so much talent in this room. Imagine what the world could be if when you do see something, when you do see the unmet need, like Emerson and Paul did, like all of the honorees have done, if you have an idea about how you can solve it, if you have an idea about how you can help it, do something. That's what changes the world. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so very much. Next, I'd like to bring to the stage Connie Cabello, who will present Dr. Cynthia Orellana.
All right, good morning, everybody. And first, I just want to say shame on me, because I actually prepared remarks and practiced and stayed within the 2-minute mark. And I asked Cynthia to do the same. I was like, girl, you got to stay within the minutes because Dylan is after us and she has to catch a plane. So I did prepare some remarks so I keep us on course here. And it's just my absolute joy and pleasure to present this award to someone I admire, my friend, Dr. Cynthia Orellana. Cynthia is currently the president and CEO of Mass Mentoring Partnership. And prior, she was here at Umass Boston getting her PhD, and she was also leading the Office of Community Partnerships. She's also held roles at Massachusetts Department of Higher Education as the Assistant Commissioner for Access and Success Strategies, and served as the Director of Commonwealth Corp. Now, I could list all the boards that she has served on: Chica Project, Community Catalyst, Bunker Hill Community College, but we would be here all day. Let's just say, if there's a meeting happening to make Massachusetts a better place, Cynthia's probably part of it. You know, I could read her bio and tell you all about the work she's done, the budgets she's managed, but I really want to talk about how this Trailblazer Award extends beyond titles and roles. We honor her not just for her resume, but for her impact and way of leading. I asked some of Cynthia's closer ones what makes her a trailblazer. Julian said she's self-made, relentlessly dedicated to her community. She makes space for those who might otherwise have been overlooked. Elena said, Cynthia blazes trails not just for herself, but for everyone around her. Her leadership inspires others by walking alongside those she serves. Melissa said, her leadership reaches across sectors, weaving racial justice into policy and transforming bold vision into lasting systemic change. She leads with humility, passion, and love. Now I, Connie, have been doing a lot of reflecting lately, mostly because I've been spending a lot of time with my friend Bel Calis, AKA Cardi B, in her new album. But stay with me for the purpose of this award. One thing I've been reflecting on a lot lately is just the importance of having people around you who are the real deal. Because frankly, as you start to have more to lose, there are more people who want you to lose. So Cynthia, I know I speak for many of us in the room, especially Team Cynthia here in the front row, when I say thank you for being you. Someone who wants us all to win, pushes us all to be better, celebrates others more than they celebrate themselves, and shows up for your people and your community in the good and in the bad. You are the real deal, and we see it. So please join me in celebrating the unstoppable and undeniable Doctora Cynthia Orellana.
That's hard. I'm super overwhelmed. I'm super overwhelmed right now. Connie, here you are. Come stand next to me. Thank you so much for those beautiful words. That was super heartfelt. And actually, Connie was the person who called me to let me know about this award. And I literally was speechless. I was shocked, and I started tearing up, and I started crying, actually, once we hung up the phone, and it was because of all the reasons that she described to me that I had been chosen for this recognition. And as I stand here before these tremendous giants who've been trailblazing for much longer than I have, and have really paved the way for us, I feel so humbled, and I sit here, and in Spanish, I'm like, yo estoy de colada. How did I make this list with these tremendous people? But it really feels amazing to be fully seen and to be lifted up in this way so much. So thank you so much. And I just want to say that I'm so grateful to my friends and colleagues from the dinner group, to Paul, to Betty, and all the folks who have been part of this wonderful organization, for all honoring me alongside Joan and Rob and Dr. Motley. Who is my dean from Northeastern University and was my chancellor here at UMass Boston. I'm the daughter of Salvadoran immigrants. I'm the last of 5 children. And I'm the first to be born in this country. I'm the first to go to college and to later get a doctorate. And I'm one of the few Latinas who has been at the many tables where I have served. I stand here because of the original trailblazers in my life, and that's my parents, Alcides and Ana Orellana. And I always get emotional when I think of my parents, because they came to this country not knowing the language, the culture, or the people. But they came with courage, the resilience and faith. Everything I am begins with them. Mami, papi, gracias por su sacrificio. I said I wasn't going to cry. I also thank the Creator for this life. Thank you. That's my sister. En verdad, ustedes me han enseñado que nada es imposible. I also want to thank the Creator for this life, for the chance to shine His light. And every night that I pray to Him to be an instrument of His peace, of His love, and His justice. And more often than not these days, my prayer is also to have mercy on our people who are being persecuted and oppressed. To my sister Marlene, who is here, and to my family who couldn't join me, thank you for being examples for me and for reminding me of where I come from. I also want to thank my mentors, the young people, especially the young people that I met here at UMass Boston that are joining me today. my friends who have become family, many of whom are here today with me, you remind me that no one accomplishes anything alone. And if you're part of my village, I would like you to stand. Anybody who's part of my village, if you'd please stand. Amari, that includes you too. I see you in the corner. I see you, Rohit. Yes. We are only as strong as the communities that hold us, that lift us higher, and that challenge us to be better. So I'm not going to get up here and talk about all the politics. I think we're all recognizing that these are really challenging times. There are forces that are turning back the clock, that are erasing our histories, that are stripping opportunities for families like mine, and robbing our children, our young people, of the right to grow up in a democracy that protects them from fear. But as I stand here in this very moment, I am standing here looking at this beautifully melanated room of people. And I feel so much hope, I feel so much joy, because moments like these remind us that even in the struggle, our light can shine through the difficult times. But I also want to remind us that hope and joy are not a strategy. They are fuel that keep us going so that we can drive action. And that is the time that we are in, and I think that's the calling that all of the folks who came before me have given to this room. One of my favorite books during my doctoral time here was written by Gloria Ansaldúa. And she once said that nothing happens in the real world unless it first happens in the images in our heads. Nothing happens in the real world unless it first happens in the images in our heads. This award is not just for me. Trust me, I'd rather be in the background. I'm not used to this kind of being in front. And this award, like I said, is not just for me. It is for all of us who are imagining and building a different way forward, often unseen, being in the background, being a driving force, and often supporting others. It is for those of us that are yet to be recognized, and that time has not come for you, but it surely will. I'll leave you with just saying that trailblazing is not about walking alone. It's about clearing a path so that many of us can begin to rise together, and so that our next generation has a road to continue this legacy as we become ancestors. When one of us is seen, all of us rise. When one of us is seen, all of us rise. So this moment in history calls for more from us sometimes than I think we feel like we can bear. I can tell you my shoulders and my back are often in a lot of pain. But it also calls for us to rise, to have courage, to rise with purpose, and to rise with love. Love is an action, it is a verb, it is a noun, and we need to practice it and say it out loud. So I love you, and I love those of you who have allowed me to be with you here this morning. Que sigamos adelante y que nunca dejemos de levantarnos juntos. Thank you. Gracias.
Another round of applause for all of the awardees, and I'd like to invite, after this photo, all of the other awardees to come to the stage for one quick picture. In the meantime, I want to say thank you to all of the many sponsors, for without them, this conference would not be possible. If there is a slide available, if you could put the sponsors up. A round of applause, please, for our sponsors as well. Yes, they're all coming up. While they are getting their picture together, I want to talk a little bit about how the dinner group was started as a reason for people to connect over food. So I have a challenge for you today as you are networking and meeting new people in this challenging time where it's nice to be encouraged and to know that other people see us. When you meet someone new, maybe simply ask them, what do you need right now? Just ask them, what do you need right now? Now, you may or may not be able to help, but that is not the point. The point is for them and for us to be able to say it out loud. So you'll have an opportunity in a little bit to connect, to network, and I hope that you will help one another to be seen. That'll get your blood flowing, huh? All right. Thank you, Joe. That was a nice break. All right. Next, we will have Alvin Tillery will come to the stage and is going to present on 3 ways we can win the fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mr. Tillery, you headed up? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Really honored to be here. Thank you to Emerson and Paul and the entire dinner group for inviting me. I was a little nervous. I'm a professor at Northwestern University where I started something called the Center for the Study of Diversity and Democracy. I also run a consulting firm called the 2040 Strategy Group where we do 2 things. We help companies and governments and nonprofits that are sincere about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion aims. So we do a lot of quantitative audits and qualitative focus groups. We write strategic plans. The other vertical, which is not really doing so well right now, is we try to help Democrats win in politics. We do polling, research, we make digital ads. And so when Emerson invited me, I thought, man, I'm going to be going to like a corporate conference. I always get in trouble for misbehaving because I start talking about the movement and things we need to do to organize. And then I come here and I listen to all of these amazing honorees, and I'm like, okay, I'm in the right place. I'm going to be okay, right? So I know that I'm in an unenviable position of following Dylan and the honorees, and I'm now the person standing between you and the networking lunch, right? So what I want to do is just really be sharp in my comments. And I think a lot of what I'm going to say follows on everything that we just heard from our honorees. I just want to give you a little bit more background about how I see things. I'm 54 years old. I'm of that generation of African Americans that integrated everything in the 70s, right? And so a lot of the speakers were talking about the kind of intergenerational memory that we have. We know that our ancestors have been through much worse, and that should propel us. That's all true. But I want us to focus our minds around the fact that history repeats itself. And we're in a moment. When I was at Morehouse College, I saw my brother Chip Greenwich in the audience. We're speaking about our times back then with our professors. They always tried to focus us around the reality that we have to use history as a cycle to propel action. So we can't just tell stories and say, oh, well, we survived much worse. We're going to be fine, right? The last honoree said, black excellence or brown excellence or knowing that we're doing well. That's not a strategy. It's absolutely right. So we've got to use the history to help us build a strategy. Another thing that I really did at Morehouse for the first time is I read Lift Every Voice and Sing. And so I, too, come out of that Black Baptist tradition that one of the earlier speakers was talking about. And, I was shocked a couple years ago after George Floyd when the NFL put the Black National Anthem on the program. So now they do the National Anthem and the Black National Anthem. And I'm watching my Twitter feed, and all these white folks are shocked that there's a Black National Anthem. And I'm like, where y'all come from, right? That's been around, right? James Weldon Johnson wrote it in like 1924, right? And so I'd always grown up singing the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, but I never really studied it and focused on the lyrics until I got to college. The second stanza of Lift Every Voice and Sing talks about stony the roads we trod, right? And what I want to say to you today is that we are on a stony road again. And you got to recognize that. If you don't recognize the stones in the road, you're going to trip. And so just reflecting on who we are, our success, the power we have, that's not going to win the fight. You have to know that the road is stony, and you've got to shift course accordingly, right? And I talk out of my own personal experience. I reference being of that generation of African Americans that integrated everything. When I moved from West Philadelphia, yes, that same neighborhood that Will Smith was talking about, that playground, that was my playground. His grandmama and my grandmama went to church together, right? So yes, that one. When I moved from West Philadelphia to New Jersey at the age of 7, go to second grade, integrate my neighborhood for supposedly better schools, and I showed up and I had no idea that the road was going to be stony. People telling me, go back to Africa. I had no concept of what that meant, right? I remember a young boy that my mother and his mother used to carpool. He said, oh, Mrs. Tillery, will you let me off, 7 years old, let me off a block before the school? Why, Albert? Well, the other kids say that I'm an N-word lover when I walk in with Alvin, and so I don't want that to happen to me. And so I started to build this consciousness up about my difference. And so I imbibed that I'm going to be, as my parents had raised me to be, excellent. Oh, just don't listen to those boys. Don't worry about it. You just focus on your school, baby, is what all the elders would say. Focus on your school. Okay, I'm going to do that. So I did that for a couple years. And then I got to fourth grade, and fourth grade was really interesting because that's where a lot of kids from outside the neighborhood that I had integrated and other kids started riding the bus together in middle school, and that we were also with high school boys. And so when at 9 years old in 1980, 2 of those high school boys decided that they were going to hang me in a tree. So I'm probably one of the few lynching survivors walking around in America that you can actually talk to. And so I remember, the day was in September. We had these little green, if you're from the 80s and 70s, you remember the Toughskins jackets and all that? I thought it was sharp. The hood would unzip into a cape. Probably too hot to be wearing it on the first day of school, but it has army green like G.I. Joe. Had to do it, right? So these older boys took that jacket that I love so much, ripped the cord, wrapped it around, took the 2 ends of the cape, hung me up there, and I remember the bus driver being on time, and our eyes met. And he scrambled down to get his toolkit, and he cut me down. And I lived. And that day started my mission, right? That day started my mission to be an anti-racist person, to try to understand what is driving this irrational hate. So I went to college trying to get answers. I went to Harvard trying to get answers. Boy, there's a lot of racism there. The brothers, I thought I was going to be studying racism from an academic sense. I was, but I was also studying racism from an experiential sense, right? Oh, Mr. Tillery, why don't you drop out and give your space to a more qualified white man? Oh, Mr. Tillery, your beautiful black skin will get you a job. Don't worry. You don't have to work as hard, right? And so being on these continual stony roads and watching other people of color thrive and grow in these environments, but also being marked by a kind of fear that I don't believe marked my ancestors, even though times were harder for them. Growing up, living in rural Georgia, right? People always say, oh, slavery, that's oh so long ago. No, it wasn't. I was raised a lot by my Aunt Sarah, who was born in 1902, died in 2011. Her parents were slaves. My grandmother knew her grandfather and grandmother. They were slaves. My great-grandmother was born in 1895. Her parents were slaves. So it's not that long ago. And then that's before you even get to the racial caste system that we euphemistically call, for some reason, Jim Crow, that didn't really end until 1968. So understanding the stakes is why I'm laying this out, right? We live in a society that has been shaped on the idea of certain people are valuable and will get all the good stuff. Other people are less valuable, and they won't get as much. And the battle on that stony road has been bending what Dr. King called that historical arc of toward justice, right? And so as I watch people respond to the current moment, we're leaning on a lot of those pillars that our ancestors leaned on. We're going to build our own colleges, Morehouse, Spelman, Howard, North Carolina, and we're going to make them excellent. And we're going to go to Harvard and beat them in debate. And that happened, right? In the 1890s and the 1900s, that all happened, right? But black excellence doesn't ever really win when it's not organized for the purpose of getting power. And that's the next piece of the puzzle. And what I'm going to tell you now, hopefully the slides will work, is that we can do three very simple things in this current fight. I founded my Center for the Study of Diversity and Democracy in 2016. Something big happened in 2016 that made me believe that my little black children were going to be raised in a society similar to the one where those boys were putting me up in a tree. And I said, no, not going back. And so I started to think about ways that we could push back and be impactful. So what I want to do is I want to talk about three goals. I want to give you an understanding of the right-wing movement that is dismantling all of the programs right now on college campuses and in corporate America that have created a semblance of equal opportunity for people of color and women and LGBTQ populations and the disabled, right? I want to debunk a lot of the right-wing disinformation about DEI programs that is fueling this movement. And it's what's so interesting is I go and I give these talks around the country, and every time I do, people raise their hands, well, as someone that benefited from affirmative action, professor, or I'm really grateful for the affirmative action I was given. And I say, okay, what school did you go to? And invariably they name a school that probably does not use affirmative action, right? Why do I say that? There are 3,500 colleges and universities in America. Affirmative action was just overturned by the Supreme Court in 2023, only mattered at 100 of those 3,500 schools, right? And so, but yet we've got black people, brown people walking around thinking, oh my God, like, thank you for the gift of my admission to this place. No, that's not what's happening, right? And so what I want you to do is to begin to sort of think about the mindset as people of color that does. Always believing the disinformation that the other side is feeding, the other side that wants to keep you out of all of these places. The other side that wants an all-white Harvard, that wants an all-white, University of North Carolina, right? Those are the two schools. That's what the table stakes are. It's not about fairness to white people. It's just not. The numbers don't bear that out. And even when we get to those 100 schools where affirmative action matters, the black and Latino students, indigenous students that are admitted to those schools have on average a 90% chance of getting admitted without the consideration of race. Affirmative action has helped no more than 600,000 people since 1968 go to college. That's less than 0.5% of the black population. Yet, I see whenever I go into corporate America, tons of people of color, oh my gosh, like, I'm so thankful for this benefit. No, you should be thankful for your talents. You should be thankful for your talents. You should be thankful for equal opportunity so that your talents can be recognized. And so what I want to do is give you a playbook for continuing to push for these equal opportunities. But let me try to tie a few things together. And again, I know I'm standing between you and lunch, and we want to have a conversation. So module 1, I'll do 2 minutes on this, understanding the anti-DEI movement. What you need to know is that the same people in the Trump administration that are threatening universities like my own at Northwestern with closure, that are threatening law firms and corporations to say, if you practice DEI, we'll take your money away, right? The same foundations got their start in the 1950s and 60s opposing Brown versus Board of Education, opposing James Meredith showing up at the University of Georgia, right? Opposing authoring Lucy showing up at the University of Alabama. They're the same people, or they're the sons and grandsons of those people. The money is the same. They are not trying to promote equality for all. They are trying to promote white supremacy. And you have to get square with that if you are going to succeed in this fight. And so the other thing I hear a lot, well, Professor, are we really being fair when we consider race? Well, if we don't consider race, all the inequalities that are woven into the system of K through 12 education, right, are never going to help that black or Latino or indigenous or Asian, because they also get affirmative action. Studies show that, right? They're the ones that run 90% of the way to admission by themselves are going to get swamped out of a pool by the kids of wealthy donors. That's about 25% of every class at Harvard are people who have a touch point from admissions, a flag, this person's parents have given in the $5 million threshold. It's not surprising that they get in more. It's not surprising when we know things about income. The best predictor of an SAT score in college is what? Income. How? Because parents of high-income families have extra money to spend on the coaching, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to pay for coaching for the test, right? So when you look at the incomes at these schools, the average Asian student's income is $250,000, white student $230,000, Latinos $75,000, blacks $55,000. So you've got kids that are running 90% of the way with a fifth of the income of their peers, right? And we're saying to them, well, not quite good enough with your 1490 and no test prep. Think about the insanity of that. Think about the insanity of that in a country that by 2040 will be about 60% black and brown. Doesn't make any sense unless you want to hold on to the old order, unless you want to hold on to racial segregation, unless you want to hold on to racial inequality, unless you believe that every spot in everything good belongs only to white people. And guess what? That's exactly where we are. The stony road that we are on right now, that is the ideology driving our governance, right? And you've got people like this gentleman, Ed Bloom, who's going around suing everyone, right? So the connection to college, yes, the Supreme Court overturned affirmative action in college admissions. Bloom and the administration are now saying, well, that makes all DEI illegal. Court after court, the Ninth Circuit says, nope, DEI is still legal. Third Circuit says, nope, DEI is still legal. Yet every day they get on television and say, if you don't stop the illegal DEI, we will take. They're just doing that to spread disinformation so that we all hear, oh my gosh, DEI is now illegal. So, I've worked with about 80 companies since 2019, and about a third of those companies immediately, when the executive order passed, Dr. Tillery, can you come and help us change our name? We can't do the DEI anymore. Why? It's illegal now. No, it's not. Well, our lawyer says that there's more risk. Okay, well, what if you're black and brown workers and you're women and you're LGBTQ and what if they sue you? Well, we can just, we'll settle those. But we can't take the reputational hit of doing DEI in a time when the administration is saying, it's illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal, right? And so those companies, some of them, there's a big bank. They pushed back because their frontline workers said, no, we're not going to allow this. Some companies, Costco, chose to do the right thing because their board leaders were like, this doesn't make any sense for human capital strategy. It makes no sense for marketing, right? Then there's Target. That find out phase. Right? And so the modal advice that I gave was to my companies, don't do anything. Don't do anything. Trump does not have the authority to cancel DEI. But what we've learned here is that a lot of these institutions that were calling me up after George Floyd, corporations, universities, it was never really about you. It's never really about you thriving. It was never really about justice. It's about marketing. It's about marketing. It's about being able to post your photos on their Twitter feed. Most of the pledges, the $30 billion in pledges that were made after George Floyd by the big companies were never paid to anybody, right? So what you have to understand is that the threat of taking money away from these institutions really shows you what they value. Money over people. Now, you might say that is scary, but the Target example in that find out phase points us to one of the things we need to think about. So the first thing we need to do is know where we are, Stony Road. Second thing is don't fall for the okey doke, as my basketball coach used to say, right? Right? Don't go on that first head fake, right? What you need to do is understand that the money is a pressure point that we can use. Now, Jamal Bryant, Brother Chip, Jamal was in school with us, right? Yeah, same class with us, right? He called for the Target fast, right? Love Jamal. That brother had no real strategy for what to do after that. He's just like, his parishioners are mad. He went to the pulpit, and it just blew up. And Target's revenue went here. Old boy had to resign, or he's resigning next year. Imagine if we had done that with a strategy. Imagine if we had taken the NAACP's buyer's guide and made a strategy around it. Why aren't we doing that? What are we doing? Right? So, what I want to tell you, just in the competition with the disinformation, is DEI programs are very popular. The last survey that my firm ran, 69% of people in corporate America who identify as white love their corporate DEI programs. Now, that's after a year-long assault from the Trump administration saying it's illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal. Before that, it was like 77%. Now, imagine what Dr. King would have been able to do, or Miss Rosa, or Fannie Lou Hamer, if 77 or 69% of white folks agreed with them in 1968. Where will we be? So if they can win in that environment, we can win in ours, but we need to get past the disinformation and the false claims. So this kind of pitting one minority group against another, right? And so, what Bloom did was he found, an argument. He's like, oh, affirmative action, it's not that it's hurting, privileged white students or white workers in corporate America. It's hurting Asian Americans. And we need to, really focus on that, right? There's not really any statistical evidence of that at all, right? But what we do have evidence of is that, this is going to surprise you guys, most of you working in corporate America, there's a lot of discrimination in corporate America. Wait, y'all aren't surprised by that? So what we know from the social sciences, from something called audit studies, is that every group of color faces massive discrimination in corporate hiring and promotion. So why, when the conservatives are like, look at our nice Asian student who did not get into Harvard, with his 1550 SAT, 75% of the kids applying have that SAT. What you need to know is if Harvard's picking 2,000 people and 30,000 are applying, something like 10 or 15,000 are qualified for a space. So it's like a lottery system at that point, right? So, but this argument of, you're hurting another minority group, all of the Asian American public affairs groups, they supported Harvard in the case, not the conservatives. Why? Because they know they face a mountain of discrimination in corporate America. I see that in my audit work all the time, right? And so what we know from audit studies is that if you send out a resume, this is the Melanathan famous black name study, part of what got them the Nobel Prize. If you send out two sets of resumes, you give one resume the name Jamal Washington. And you say Jamal is a 4.0 valedictorian at Yale. He's an Olympic sprinter. Going back to Dylan's thing. Olympic sprinter. Trains seeing eye dogs in his spare time. Right? Volunteers with the Red Cross and drives an ambulance. Right? That's Jamal, right? And you have Chad Pennington. Chad's a very nice guy. He has a 3.7 at his good private school. He caddies at his father's golf course. And he was an Eagle Scout. Very impressive. Who should get more callbacks? Jamal. Who do you think gets more callbacks? Chad gets 50% more callbacks. And we did the same thing we replicated that with Asian Americans, right? Sun Yi gets 30% less or 40% less callbacks, right? And so what we have to respond to is DEI was never about all of these kinds of advancement of minority groups over others. It was about leveling the playing field in a playing field that was unequal. Because we've got to throw off our legacy as a country, right? And the way that we win, the third thing, is by organizing, remembering our history. And so, like, you know, I heard a lot of speakers talk about, well, we all know that our ancestors survived. We don't all know that. The America that I grew up in as a child, like almost 100% of black folks were, you know, native-born descendants of slaves. Now about 10% of our population are people who have immigrated since 1985 from Africa and the Caribbean, right? Something on the order of 90% of our Latino population are post-1985 immigrants. Something on the order of like 85% of our Asian population, post-1985 immigrants. So what's interesting about 1985? 25 years after America became a multiracial democracy. So they don't know. One thing that was really interesting growing up with all these people that have been touched by slavery in my life, the elders never talked about that. My auntie would say, oh, white folks are acting just like they did in the slavery days. I say, Auntie, you weren't a slave. Oh, hush, boy. I'd say, but what does that mean? And my grandfather's like, when they were growing up in Georgia, they had to sign contracts to be sharecroppers. And the overseers said, you will treat us with the same respect just like in the slavery days. So that stuck with them. So they say, oh, just like in the slavery days. And so they never talked about any of that stuff. So I think and I've taught some of the people in Trump's inner circle, sadly, when I was over at that bad university over there. Like, they were my undergraduates, right? Some of them. And so they didn't learn anything from me. They just smiled nicely so they get their grade and went on to whatever thing they were doing. But what you need to realize is that there's a group of powerful people sitting around at lunch and dinner and on the golf course thinking about ways to exclude you. They take joy in it, they are relentless, and they are not moved by your hashtag Black Excellence posts. They're not moved by your hashtag I'm tired, hashtag I'm going to sip some tea, hashtag Black women told you, hashtag brothers did vote for Kamala. See? 78%, Dr. Al. We needed 85% of y'all, but and we would have won the election. So what you need to understand is that is their reality. They take joy in it. Your excellence will not save you in isolation. They are deeply committed to this project. For most of our history, America was a racialized dictatorship. 78% of our history. We've only been a multiracial democracy since 1968. Just to put it into context, that's 57 years. I'm 54 years old. No wonder those boys were not happy when I showed up in their neighborhood, right? So we've got to channel the energy. We've got to root this conversation about DEI back to the movement that won in 54 when Brown was decided, in 64 when racial segregation was made illegal by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We had a man who was assassinated, sadly, a couple weeks ago. I don't want anyone to be assassinated. As a victim of racial violence, I don't want violence against anyone. But I'm sorry, I will never say that Charlie Kirk was an American hero, an icon, anyone that we should celebrate. He was a racist. He campaigned on a platform of overturning the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Why? Why would anyone want to send you back to the back door of Target? Why would anyone want to have separate colored and white drinking fountains again? When I used to go to my family's farm in Jeff Davis County, Georgia, in the mid-'70s, there were white men that still had the signs up. Because the FBI ain't going to go to Jeff Davis County and say, take down the signs, right? So why would anybody want to go back to that, right? And so part of where we are in politics is we've raised 2 generations of black and brown professionals who have no understanding of the stony road, of the table stakes, of who's against us, of what to do about it. We gotta do better. Lunch is coming up, so let me move on. You gonna share the slides, brother? Are they gonna get the slides? Yeah? People can get the slides? Okay, good. So you can read about a lot of this when you have some free time. So the third thing we need to do is organize. And so as a Democratic pollster, I was probably the first person to tell the White House, because we told them in like January of 2024 that they were going to lose because they were not doing well with the black vote. And they were not super happy. So we were doing like a bunch of message testing, and we were just throwing Bidenomics. How do young black voters feel about Bidenomics? Nobody liked it. And so what happened in this last election is the Democrats lost 10 million voters that showed up for them in 2020 that didn't show up in 2024. So that wasn't because they all went over to Trump. We lost about 2.5 million black voters to the couch. That's more than the share that Trump gained with black voters. It is true, the hashtag brothers voted for Kamala, black men are the most progressive group in the country that voted more for Kamala than any other group. That's absolutely true. So the groups that lined up, 78% nationally black voters for Kamala. Asian Americans were second with about 70%, right? And so what we tried to do all throughout the election cycle was convince the White House that they needed to have messaging that would go speak directly to black communities. And what were black communities nervous about? The rollback of DEI programs. Donald Trump putting in place national stop and frisk policing, as is happening in DC and other cities. The only thing they took from us is black maternal health. We found that like everybody was worried about black maternal health. My colleague, my partner in business, Tabitha Bonilla, tested that, and it just went through the roof. That's like one of the few things that made black men be like, yeah, my lady, my mom, like they all had trouble at the hospital. Like that like makes them run to the polls. The Biden folks were like, thank you, we'll take that, and we'll leave all this other stuff behind. And so what happens is that the Democratic Party got so used to, black voters overachieving in politics because the baby boomer generation, the ones that their parents were mostly denied the vote, the ones that got to vote in the 1960s, they are the best voters in the country. And they vote 85 to 90% Democratic. Now, the millennial and the Gen Z generations, they support the Democrats at levels of like 6 out of 10, right? Black men, it's like 5 out of 10, and that's going to guarantee them a loss. So what we have been trying to urge the Democrats to do, BIPOC officials overall, is to put on the table all of these important policies to protect DEI that will motivate people of color across the board. And so far, they're not really listening. So what I decided to do in the last cycle was I started something called the Alliance for Black Equality. And the Alliance for Black Equality is a 527 super PAC. We ran a bunch of digital ads. They were really great. One of our ads was voted the best political ad targeting young people in the cycle. It's this one. It's called Would You Date a Trump Voter? We basically sent a young woman out to walk down the streets of Chicago and just ask people randomly, would you date a Trump voter? And people were like, nah. And like, she encountered like a 70-year-old man, and she walked up to him, would you date a Trump voter? He goes, absolutely not, right? And so it got like 3 million hits in 4 weeks, right? So we raised $300,000 in 4 weeks. With that money, we were able to reach 3.6 million black voters between October 1st and Election Day. The precincts where we ran most heavily in Atlanta and Milwaukee, wait for it, are the only precincts in the country where the vote share for Kamala Harris went up over 2020 levels. So we got to like a week before the election, and the Harris campaign, they're finally like, oh, you know, we don't have any black ads, because they started waking up to they were going to lose. We don't have any black ads. And they called me up. I said, just take the 10 I've made. Here you go. And the young person's like, well, we've got to test them. Test them? We're 10 days out from the election, right? So the model that we can use for, oh, I think it's frozen. There we go. The model that we can use, I hope this is connected to the internet. So I'm going to try to play the ad now. The model that we use to mobilize voters, we can use in the current moment to spread the word against disinformation and to also rally people. Because, you know, the time of, and I'm very deferential to the pastors and all this, the time of them like going on TV and saying, hey, y'all, we're going to march at 12:30 on next Tuesday. Everybody show up. You have a big rally. That's great. I still go to the marches, but you know who doesn't? Any black or brown person under 40, right? Unless it's organized by someone in their own generation. Why do they go to marches? They go to marches because the digital algorithm is telling them to. So my model for shaping politics in this fight is we've got to cut digital ads that will inspire people. Hopefully this is played. Is this thing on the internet?
Dead, keeping with the campaign promise made by President Trump.
My administration has taken action to abolish all discriminatory diversity.
We're asking powerful black politicians in the blue states to pass laws that will protect black life.
We must govern on big principles and not on petty differences.
There's 63 black members of Congress. We're putting pressure on them to pass laws that will counter what Trump is doing at the federal level. That's our project.
So you can watch the ad when you get the deck, but the point is we've got to remind all of these politicians of color that they work for us, that they are accountable to us. And the way to do that is by pressure. And we've got to build this pressure campaign so that they will defend us, because otherwise they're not, right? And I've sat at the feet of a lot of our civil rights leaders talking about in the Obama era. President Obama would always say, I'm with you guys, great ideas, now make me do it. Now make me do it. Why? Because they need cover. The Democratic Party is an organization that is controlled by donors, the same forces that want to keep you bottled up in corporate America. So the only way to get something that you need from politicians, it's not by like inviting them to oh, thank you for coming, we love having you. You can do all that, but real power is when they walk into the room and they know that they're going to have to give you something, because you're already organized with your demands and your accountability mechanisms to make them do it, right? And so the Alliance for Black Equality Project is my way of using these 3 lessons that I've tried to teach you today. Know the road you're on and its historical roots. Don't fall for the disinformation, and organize, because collectively your black and brown excellence is powerful. It made the country a democracy. But if it's just individual, we're going to stay exactly where we are. And so if you'd like to learn more about my work and what we're doing, You can scan this QR code and go to our website. And we're now building our project for the midterms. What we're trying to do is just bring back the 2.5 million young black people that set it out. We're also trying to mobilize to get Latino men to really understand how the economic livelihood is tied to a lot of these immigration battles, right? To kind of really make that clear. And I'll stop. And I don't know that we have time for any questions, but I think I'm at time. Couple minutes? Okay. So I know that was a lot. And again, I know y'all want to eat. But any questions? Yes. Do we have a mic for? We want other folks to hear what you have to say. It's probably more important than what I have to say in response. I love that jacket, by the way. Can I just say that?
Thank you. Yeah. Give me a bad mic. Thank you. I really appreciate all of the data-driven information that you shared with us. I think there's a lot of urban legends that you kind of unleashed here, especially with affirmative action. I'm love being at a conference, let's go, ready to work after the fact. How would you suggest that in our own communities we help to mobilize and inform and really get moving, but with connection to a bigger purpose such as your own? Thank you.
Yes, I think that we have misunderstood something fundamental in our work. So first, we have the generations, and I'm in these generations too, that grew up under kind of the multiracial democracy and affirmative. We've come to believe that representation on its face is power, but it is not. So that's the first thing that you have to understand. Representation is not power. It's a pathway to power, but only if the representatives are in your interest. So we've had Brother Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court for like 35 years, right? Before KBJ got there, and that's the example of representation not being power, right? So black folks are the best citizens in the country in terms of voting, in terms of donating their time to charity, typically local causes, churches, school reading programs, all of that. It's fantastic. It feels good. And that's just not me saying it, like the studies show that. When you compare income levels, black folks vote more than any other group. Now that's changing because the boomers are dying off and being replaced by the young folks that don't buy it. They don't know the history, right? We've got to begin to do a couple things in politics that will help us in this fight. We over-index on cultural news and sports news, and we don't do enough with political knowledge-building exercises. That's the first thing. We don't listen to black sources and brown sources that have the knowledge that will help you in this fight. Here's the other thing. As donors, we may be tithing to our churches, we may be giving to the NAACP. I do all those things too. None of those organizations can help you in a political fight. So a big reason why we lost in 24 is I am saying to the White House, y'all ain't doing it with black voters. And like they're calling on people, black elected officials. Well, no, well, Joe, like every black person in my church is going to vote for you, and we're getting pushback. Oh, well, the president believes that he's doing all right. Oh, okay, that's not what the numbers show, right? And so that's because the churches and the civil rights groups are all institutional arms of the Democratic Party. And that's not a bad thing. What that means is that when the party needs to mobilize, they sprinkle money on them to go out and spread the message, but they can't even go and not, like, the churches they couldn't even knock on your door and say, vote for Kamala Harris. They could just say, please vote. You say that to a 30-year-old black person, please vote, they're not tied to the Democrats. They were voting for Trump, some of them. So we've got to have a new structure, and that's why I built the Alliance for Black Equality, 527 Super PAC. It can do political work. I also think the transparency piece, so like the Alliance for Black Equality is, every dime that you give is spent on mobilization. I think a lot of us have begun to think that the nonprofits are like a black hole. I'm giving money to these groups, where does it go? Well, that's because they are professional groups running an organization. They need to survive. We've got to form more nimble organizations where we can track the money for impact. And then we've got to be talking to the young people about where we came from. You're not protecting them. My wife and I have struggled about this. She's an immigrant from West Africa. It's one of that 10% I talked about, right? And, you know, my kids are hearing me on calls, like with, you know, politicians. And she's just like, oh my God, like, is it too? And I'm like, they need to know, like right now. Because we've got 2 generations of kids who don't know, and it's not serving us well. Now we got to re-educate them, make sure that the young folks. So I hope I'm answering your question, but if you can do more, you've got to give more time and finances to overtly political causes. Because the nonprofits, while they may be political, they cannot be political in a way that will protect you. Yeah.
Professor Tillery, this has been really, really inspiring.
Thank you.
To hear the words that you're speaking. I just got back from Germany from 10 days, and every day, 2 to 5 people would say, because they would hear the accent, are you from America? They think that we are the dumbest people ever.
Yeah.
That we have not learned from the past.
Yep.
And so had multiple conversations, and, you know, I think about, you know, what I've seen for the last year, and I'm going to tell you that I am terrified. Absolutely terrified for my family.
Yep.
And for me, and I'm going through the process of getting residency in another country.
Yep.
Because I think we all need to be
we need an
prepared.
Exit plan. Yep.
We all need to be prepared. But I think this whole notion of being organized, you know, having a plan, is something that we're not hearing.
No, we're not.
Whether we're black or white, we're not hearing it. I look at the NAACP and the Urban League and our churches, and then if you look at the past of our history, they were the backbone of who got us over the big hump. Where are they? Where are they?
Yeah.
They're not organized.
Yeah.
I've spoken to some of the leadership, and they say that they have a plan, but like you said, the last time you went to the White House, you say you're 10 days away. We got to like really figure this out.
Yep.
Have you spoken to them?
I have.
Is there anyone out there who's trying to organize and get their leadership team on at least the same page, maybe not the same strategy, but I just don't see us as a group getting this together. And every day, someone in our black and Latino community is getting effed.
Yep.
And we got to do something. I am just nervous. I'm scared. I'm so glad that we live in the Northeast, in the Boston market.
Yep.
And we're lucky to be here. But all of my family is from the South.
Yeah.
And all of my family is poor.
Yeah.
And I don't see that they have a path of surviving this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not optimistic either, and I am also forging my own exit plan. I'll just be honest about that. I think that the relationship with the civil rights orgs, which are still trying to do good work, but they are institutionalized in ways that make them conservative. The same way it makes Hakeem Jeffries conservative. They have other, they're accountable to more than just us. And there's also a class dynamic. So when I was raising for my super PAC last year, like I gave way more money to it myself than my wife would like to, would have supported probably, right? So I've still got to live that down a bit. But yeah, I'm on Wall Street talking to very wealthy black individuals, and they're like, well, Al, I gave $2,500 to Kamala, and I'm like, $2,500? Like, you do know that like Elon is writing like $200 million checks just to run ads in Pennsylvania. So like, just the scale of what we need to do, and of course there is, and I love Oprah Winfrey as well. I grew up watching it, but the campaign paid her $1 million. $1 million to show up. That flow should be going the other way, right? And so that's where we've got to learn. I see that I'm probably am I at time? Do you need to? Okay. Thank you all for listening. Sorry to be over time.
Certainly a very necessary conversation and a heavy one. I do want us to remember that we are more powerful than we think. And I also believe that we are a reflection of our collective consciousness. So let's be careful about the types of, let's balance the things that we're consuming to ensure that we have the strength in order to fight these heavy things. Thank you so much, Mr. Tillery, Professor Tillery, for your conversation. All right, as we head off to lunch, again, I want to say thank you to the sponsors. If there is a slide that could go up while I am talking, thank you so very much for giving us this opportunity. As we head off to this networking lunch, I want to remind you that there are vendors on the second floor. Please go see them and patronize them on the first floor. Thank you. They are on floor 1. Lunch is on 1 also. All right. So don't forget to engage people that you haven't met before, lift one another up, find out what you need, and we'll see you back here at, are we still doing 12:30? Okay, we'll see you here at 12:30. Thank you so much. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us. Welcome back to those of you who were here this morning. How was lunch? Did you network? Did you find out what anybody needed? Y'all forgot the question from earlier. It's okay. There's still time. Actually, could you turn to your neighbor maybe? Just, you don't have to do left or right, but just pick one and just ask the person what's something they need right now in general. All right. That's right. Yep. I've lost the room. People are like, I have tons of needs. Okay, so here's what I want you to do, because that sparked a lot of conversation. Okay, so you can talk about it at the mixer. You can continue this conversation at the mixer. If you could put the slide back up with the QR code. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, then please avail yourself of that QR code, and you can talk about what you need and how we can possibly help one another in this sort of barter system. And then, of course, money is always good, too, which that might have been the answer. All right, welcome back. More good content. Okay, this afternoon we have a panel session called Meeting the Moment. And I know I talked earlier about nourishment, and that has been a theme in my sphere, I would say, for the last month. So it is very apropos that we're talking about connecting in the dinner group and the nourishment that you hopefully are getting and certainly will continue to get. But when I heard that the theme was meeting the moment, it made me think of like when you're hungry And when you're hungry, you want something that's gonna make you, that's satisfying. And so in this meeting the moment, I hope what you're getting from this content is something that helps you to actually meet the moment that we're in. So I would like to bring up the moderator, Mr. Jonathan Allen.
Y'all give our incredible MC a wonderful round of applause. Some good energy. It's a little monotone. Can y'all give her a little bit more love, please? Amazing. And let's give the dinner group team a round of applause for organizing, making this happen. Shout out to you for your leadership. Thank you for your incredible leadership. And to all of yourselves for showing up today during a time when so many other people decided to stay home, decided to be down. You decided to get up and get out, come together and do something about the things that you are concerned about in this world. Give it up for yourselves as well. And so we're getting ready, and let me just introduce myself before I introduce our incredible panelists that will be joining me for this conversation. I'm Jonathan Allen. I'm co-founder and director of development at Leadership Brainery. We support, thank you, come on my LB people. We support college students as they think about and navigate the admissions process into master's and doctoral degree programs. I was co-founder with my partner Derek because we experienced being underrepresented in law school, in our med programs and other graduate programs, and said we understand that there's a need for more of us to be in the seats of power, and certainly in management and senior leadership roles, and graduate education is one of the accelerated pathways on that track. So that's the work we do. And so I get to every day mobilize resources to ensure that we can deliver on test prep, admissions coaching, and grant aid for students who are transitioning into those graduate programs. And we got a few LV team members. Medea is in the house, our director of programs. Y'all give it up as well. And so as we think about meeting the moment, we're also taglining this conversation about how individuals are stepping up with action. Everybody say action. All right, so we can talk all day about the things we want to do, the change we want to make, but we're going to dive into what are people doing? Everybody say doing. And so today I have the honor of moderating this conversation alongside Rasan Hall. Come on up as I say your name. And I'm not going to give y'all their bio because they're going to say hello to you again and give you their titles and the organizations that they represent and a little bit about what they do, as well as Natanya Craig. And we also have Juan Carlos Morales as well. Y'all give it up. I see y'all little swag. Come on. Y'all can have a seat. Thank y'all so much for taking the time to be here and to join us for this conversation. And as we dive in to what it means to meet the moment, what it means to step up with action, there are so many things that can keep us from stepping up. I mean, many of us can name some of it. Sleep is one of them, right? Right? I just don't feel like it is another one, right? There's so many different things, hardships, financially, physical ailments, so many things that can really stop us in our tracks. But us being here together today is the demonstration of how convening power gives us more energy to keep going when the going gets tough. And so let's dive into this thing. We've titled it, even the theme of the conference is around meeting the moment. And so when we think about meeting the current moment, what does that mean to you, Rasan?
Well, first of all, thank you to the dinner group for coordinating and bringing us together for such a time as this. I think it's important that we have these conversations in what seem to be perilous times. And so when you ask me the question, what does it mean to meet the moment, I think about what this moment Okay, I'm Rasan Hall. I am I just thought everybody knew me, my bad.
Everybody know Rasan, right?
My name is Rasan Hall. I'm the president and CEO of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. who I heard when I got here, about 5 people approached me and like, yeah, the professor just called out the Urban League. So I promised not to crash out. But I think it was, from what I've been told and what he shared with me, I think it brings up a relevant point around the relevance, the impact, the effectiveness of historic legacy civil rights organizations. And so to your question, Jonathan, about what does it mean for me to meet the moment, I have to look at what this moment actually is and how much it is different or similar to what we have experienced, particularly as people of color, but particularly black folks in this country. And although it may seem intensified and happening all at once at a more rapid rate, this is not unique to the American experience. From slavery to the post-Reconstruction era, through the pushback from the civil rights movement, the war on crime, the war on poverty, the war on drugs. And so what it means to meet the moment that is hyper-intensified is to show up and to speak out, but also to be with our people, to encourage and to empower our people, to speak truth to power, to provide resources, to provide guidance, direction, encouragement, hope. That's what it means to meet the moment. Some of that seems like superficial platitudes. And I've been in conversations where people are like, the world is burning and we out here talking about where them fans at. And I get the critique, but I also understand that as an affirmation of our humanity. That despite what we are facing, despite how there have been attempts to dehumanize us, despite how people have been disappearing folks from our community, that we're still alive. And that we still have joy, and that we still have hope, and we will not be broken by the attempts of this administration, and we have resisted through oppression and marginalization for generations, and we will continue to exist, but not only exist, thrive.
Y'all can say amen. I almost bust out, oh, I got my boots on the ground. All right, all right. Natanya.
Yes. Hey, y'all. I am Natanya Craig Okendo. My father would have been very proud, by the way, just calling me a Craig, but my husband probably would have had a problem with that. But I am so happy to be here with y'all. I love being with us, y'all. I just have to say that. I am the executive director of the Boston Women's Fund, and I'm also going through perimenopause. And the reason why I say that is because I'm going to use, thank y'all. Hey, y'all. Where my sisters at? I see you. Hot. I see you. All right. I'm here for it all, y'all. I'm here for it all. Y'all probably didn't get no sleep last me either. All right. So for me, I think I took this a little bit more. I brought it to the moment, right? Like literally the government shut down. And at the Boston Women's Fund, I always tell this story that there was one year we had a really hard year, and I was going through it with our finance committee, and I was crying line by line. I just kept crying. And it still hits me to this day. And at the end, our treasurer said, I never sat in a room with an executive director who cried through a budget meeting that wasn't making, not cutting their job, essentially. And I said, well, to me, these numbers are actually my people. They're not numbers. My budgets have never been numbers. Wow. So when I think about, I bring that up because the shutdown isn't just about the spreadsheets, y'all. It's families losing their health care, right? It's our people splitting their needs to make them last. It's neighbors deciding whether to pay their rent or to get treatment. And so for me, these fights come down to one thing. And do people live with dignity or get pushed into despair? And it's not only about the budgets. What we're up against is bigger than that, right? This government is running, I'm probably gonna get fired, an authoritarian playbook. Part of it's policy, but part of it is psychology, y'all. And it's impacting blue states just like ours. They want us to believe they're unstoppable. They want us to feel small, tired, beaten down before the fight even starts. But here's the thing, y'all. They do want us to blink first, right? And AOC said that, and she's right,
because that's their whole game, to make us believe they're inevitable, that they're bigger than us. But that's not real power, not at least how I see it. Real power is not forcing people into fear. It's people standing together and refusing to break, as we have always have, y'all. We always have. So no, we don't blink, we don't back down, and we sure as hell don't give up on our people. Because in the end, their power is fear, ours is each other.
So powerful, so powerful. JC,
That was beautifully said. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm JC Morales. I'm the CEO of Surfside Capital Advisors. Delighted to be here, and thank you for having me. We are an M&A fractional CFO and HR solutions firms. And when I think about your question, 3 words come to mind: fear, unity, and resistance, right? Fear, because as I think about particularly the Latino community, there's a ton of fear, right? And that is affecting everything from healthcare outcomes to educational gaps and needs, to housing, immigration, the rates. I mean, this is a real challenge for the Latino community, right? It's got an impact on the economy. Our economy cannot work without the Latino community. It's just that simple, right? It's also a time that we need to protect our freedom, and freedom is not free, right? This is the time that we need to unify and resist, right? In the Latino community, a few of us have founded something called Unidos en Power, which is up to 2,000 people now. It's a statewide coalition of advocacy among policy issues that really affect the Latino community, largely housing, economic development, immigration, healthcare, right? But the whole unity theme transcends the Latino community. This is all of us that are under attack, right? And this nation has been under attack many times, right? We were under attack during the Great Depression of the 1930s. We were under attack during the civil unrest of the 60s. We were under attack when the inflation rate was hitting 17% in the Carter years. We were under attack when, George Floyd and Charlie Kirk got assassinated. We will prevail. I am hopeful, right? I am hopeful, and we will prevail because we have this thing called the Constitution, right? And that Constitution is getting challenged right now, right? But what's happening at the federal level has impact across red and blue states. And trust me, I do believe, and I'm hopeful, that there will be a pendulum swift back into where this nation needs to be. That's how I'm feeling right now. Some people accuse me more hopeful than I should be, but I do feel we will prevail. And the key to that is unity, resistance, increasing the magnitude and the strength of our voices.
And what are we without hope? And there's nothing new under the sun. And so you're right on. And so I want you to keep your mic hot, because I want you to answer this next question, because when we think about everything that is transpiring, let's unpack a bit how your organization is adapting in the moment. Is anything changed? Have you shifted anything in response to the current political, economic, and even social climate?
Certainly, and I'm speaking certainly from a business standpoint, right? We run an M&A and fractional CFO business. We recently launched our HR business. As a matter of fact, some of my HR partners are here. And the reason for that is because we have to meet people where they're at. Businesses are faced with incredible people challenges during periods like this, right? Whether you are dealing with restructurings or whether you are meeting incredibly high levels of stress in the workforce and mental health issues, right? Dealing with employee absenteeism, right? That requires a special need, right? And so that's how our business reacts to that. Relative to the community, and I wear many hats in the community as one of the founding members of Unidos in Power, the Latino Equity Fund, and Mass Development. We really have seen the effect of these draconian changes in the equity climate in businesses. In our client portfolio, which is largely comprised of people of color, I would say revenues are down on average 30-40%, right? So we are basically dealing with an economic and commercial impact of having to deal with the equity climate, right? So requires a fair amount of thinking, a lot of businesses under stress, right? We're working with the governor through the Latino Stewardship Council in trying to impact policies that would be more supportive of the business climate. But that's how kind of like I'm thinking about it.
So just at the Boston Women's Fund, we're an intermediary. So that means I have the joy of spending most of my time raising money to then get it out to Black and brown women and gender expansive folks who are doing work on the front line. We don't fund charity. I guess that's where I'll start, right? We fund resistance, resilience, and reimagining. We invest in those building power outside of the spotlight with or without traditional approval. And because transformation doesn't trickle down, at the Boston Women's Fund, we recognize it rises from the ground up. So there's a couple of things we do. Nothing about how we allocate money is traditional. First, we start off with nominations from our community. So we start asking them, who's serving you, right? What organizations are you going to that we need to know about? Nobody ever asked the community that. We love talking to executive directors. We love talking to staff, y'all. We get it, because we are those people too. But it's important for us to get to the ground. Another thing we're doing is for our leaders who are on the ground, our frontline first responders, because let's be real, that's what grassroots leaders are. They are frontline first responders. And for them, we're trying to figure out how we getting them more money for their wellness, period. If that wellness looks like you need a week off, here's $5,000. If that wellness looks like you need some money for therapy, here's $1,000. We're not concerned yet, we will be at some point, with how we manage this process. We're just excited that we can do it. And I think the last thing I'll say is that we're showing up with vulnerability. I'm scared as hell every single day. Every time I write something on LinkedIn, every time I send a note to our grantee partners or someone in our leadership group, I need them to understand that I am not brave and courageous. I am brave and courageous because I stand with you, not because I'm standing alone in the seat at this fund. That means nothing to me, to be honest. I say this all the time. The hours may belong to the organization. The purpose will always belong to my people. And so that is what we're doing different.
Period.
So for the Urban League, I feel like I got to do a little table setting, because I think a lot of people know who the Urban League is, but don't necessarily know what it is we do. And so at the turn of the century, Black folks were fleeing racial violence in the South and looking for economic opportunity in northern cities, and came to northern cities and found discrimination and sometimes racial violence in the North. And two sociologists came together to create the Urban League to address the temporal concerns of Black people who had recently come from the South, and either train them for the job opportunities that existed or help advocate for them to get the employment opportunities that they were qualified for. And over the last century plus, that's the work that we've been doing, and that work cuts across economic development, workforce development, entrepreneurship, youth STEM and education, health equity, housing, and civic engagement and justice. And that's the work that we have been doing all along. And in terms of impact, we have served, between the 92 affiliates across 36 states, 3.8 million people. 246,000 people have been placed in jobs. 21,000 people have purchased new homes. 8.3 million people have benefited from healthcare services. 3 million have benefited from education services. 6.1 million have mobilized civic engagement and activism, and 23.7 million have been served by an Urban League affiliate. And so, to the extent that there's questions about our effectiveness, the data says something different. What we're doing different, however, in this moment, because yes, workforce development and supporting small businesses and creating pathways and pipelines into post-secondary success for our young people are important, this moment is unique, and the threats that we are facing, we have not faced as acutely in recent years. And so one of the things that we're doing differently at our affiliate is being more collaborative and working in coalitions with other grassroots organizations, whether it's being in Brockton and holding a candidates forum and working with grassroots organizations there, or whether it's being at the table with the climate infrastructure table, where there's other organizations that are trying to work on creating clean energy jobs and building decarbonization and advocating for employment opportunities in the green energy sector, or if it's policy advocacy at the state level to remove barriers, trying to get clean slate legislation passed so records get automatically sealed when people are eligible, or raising the age of juvenile jurisdiction, or making sure that legislation is passed to increase literacy rates, because our babies can't read, y'all. And so that's not historically the work that the Urban League has done, but that's the work that we're doing now, and we're pivoting to be on the ground and have a more, we are not a grassroots organizing organization, but the need for this moment requires us to be in community with the organizations that are doing that grassroots advocacy.
Yes, yes. And thank you all for your leadership and the work that your organizations are doing. It's so critical, it's so important, and you just don't get the recognition and the appreciation often. No matter what awards you ever do get, no matter what magazine you are listed in, that's not the thanks. And so I appreciate even you, Latanya, talking about the people. And the importance of hearing from them and what it is that they're saying and are feeling. And we live in communities. I just moved to Roxbury, by the way, my friends. And I'm so excited. I've been in Brighton for the last 10 years in the same one-bedroom apartment since grad school. And so this is a major milestone in my family's life. And we were talking with our neighbors the other day about community and the fact that the people that live around you, the people that live down the street, the people that you see at the store, the people that you see when you go vote, the people that you see for your children who are going to school, that's your community. And it goes beyond that, because we got folk that live outside the city limits too. That's our community, because we're interconnected, we're interrelated, we're interdependent. We need each other no matter what the zip code is. But as we think about community and we think about collaboration, how do we overcome the crab in the bucket mentality and complex that often evades and disrupts the ability for us to collaborate effectively? Come on, let's get into it. Because so many of us experience that, right? You work hard, and as you get a little bit of this, then somebody want to come pull you down and try and rain on your parade, or make working together more difficult. How are you navigating that? What is your word? What is your message to how we can continue to unify and not become subjected to that?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a troublesome statistic to some, right? During the previous presidential election, a very significant amount of Latino votes went to President Trump, right? And when you decompose a lot of what transpired in those votes, it's fairly complex, right? The feeling in places like Lawrence and Holyoke is perhaps different than Chelsea and Lynn, right? At the end of the day, there's a lot of misinformation, right? And one of the things that we've done at Unidos in Power is we've created this thing called the Dímelo Talks, which are like tech talks at each one of these community strongholds, right? There's close to 1 million Latinos in the Commonwealth right now, and that population is growing at twice the growth rate as any other population growth in the entire Commonwealth. So we battling misinformation by being close to the ground with these TED Talks on various issues that are very significant, you know, whether it's healthcare or housing or economic development or immigration. That's how we're trying to combat the riffraff. And I think we're making some progress, by the way. I'll close with one little note that I heard on NPR this morning. This year will likely be the first year in this nation, 60 years, in the last 6 decades, that we would have net immigration outflow as opposed to inflow, right? For the obvious reasons, right? You can't have a 2 to 3% GDP growth rate with negative population growth. It just doesn't happen, right? So there is a reason that the Federal Reserve is dropping rates. There is a reason why the unemployment rates are climbing, right? Winter is coming, right? And quite frankly, that will impact some of the policies in Washington, right? I'll pause on that.
It's real. Thank you. What are you thinking about?
Well, as a funder, I have to be honest, I think we're part of the problem. So I just remember when I was working at the Urban League, that partnerships and collaborations, y'all, I don't know if y'all remember this, I know this is telling my age, but like, it was basically like, hey, can I put you on this application because we're about to apply to the Boston Foundation, we just want to make sure that they need partners, right? Like, that's kind of how it was. This is the early 90s, y'all. If y'all can pretend like y'all didn't do that, it's okay. And that's how we started partnerships. So I think, one, philanthropy had this forced kind of top-down, y'all need to be in partnerships working together. I think the point was well taken. I think the approach was wrong. And I think it's part of what started this crab in the bucket mentality that we often see here in Boston. So I as a funder, I just want to say, we might have fucked up, y'all. Okay, so that's one. We don't like to admit those, when we make the mistakes. The second thing is that because of the way that the money flows, whether that's individual donors or that is funders, it's incredibly competitive. And so I just want to say to my sisters, like, I get it. Like, it's hard to be up against other really strong organizations. I think a stance that I've recently taken about 5 years ago is that I'm just going to start mentioning other people's names in the rooms that I'm in with other funders. Like, there's enough for all of us. And I think that there was a part of the Kool-Aid that I drank, y'all, that there wasn't. That only a few of us really needed to be funded. There's actually reports that might say that. And I'm saying there's enough for all of us. And so how are we mentioning names, bringing up people, being in deep collaboration, being more vulnerable about what we're going through as leaders so we could have real talk about what it's going to take to get us out of this mess? Because until we're real about how hard it is to sit at the top of some of these organizations, what we're going through, what we're trying to do as a side hustle, all of those things, y'all, the truth is that the sector is killing us. The sector is killing us. And our passion and our purpose is driving us. But our vision is never being matched by those dollars. And so we gotta start coming together to talk about why.
So I'll piggyback on that in my role as a trustee for the Hyams Foundation. And one of the things, and I affirm this notion that philanthropy has been part of the problem. What I will say, at least at Hyams, is that we have been intentional in trying to decolonize the philanthropic space and bring a different framework and bring the voices of the people who are doing the work to the table. And so we have created design teams that are building out programming and funding models to make sure that the work is getting done, informed by the people who are actually doing the work. A lot of the funding that we do goes through our anchor organizations, our partner organizations, and so if you are not working with those anchor organizations, the likelihood of funding is limited. Not to say we won't fund you, but we're prioritizing the folks who are working in coalition and doing the collaborative work, and so I think that is a part of the solution and how we navigate that. From the perspective of the Urban League, some of the work that I've tried to do in this role is to just show up as transparently and as vulnerably as possible, and not enter the space with the idea that what we're bringing to the table is the be-all and end-all, and people need to get on board with what we're doing. We're here to be collaborative, and to the extent that something that we're offering or trying to work on mimics or is in parallel with another program that another organization is offering, the need is significant enough that your workforce development program ain't gonna capture everyone's. And so we're there to catch some of the folks who are slipping through the cracks. And in that process of doing this work and being in dialogue and conversation, hopefully we can find a way to work collaboratively together to make sure that the other folks that we're not catching are being caught by someone. And then lastly, I'll just say it's really just about showing up without an agenda, supporting other people's work, supporting other people's organizations and efforts, creating opportunities for young upstart nonprofit organizations and not feeling some type of way because they might be venturing into your silo of work, because there's enough out. Well, I used to say there was enough money out there for everybody to eat. There still is, but the purse strings are kind of closed. But that's the mentality that we need to continue to have instead of this scarcity mindset.
And you got to find new ways to get money. Ain't that right? And we gonna do what Natanya just said, and we're gonna make sure when we go in rooms that we speak somebody else's name. Can we all agree to that? All right. Everybody didn't clap, so can we get can I get a show of hands? Show of hands of who is committed to going into a room and saying somebody else's name. Let me see what y'all got going on over there. All right, yes. That's what we're doing. So next room I'm in and you come in, you tell me about yourself and not somebody else. I would say, no, you told me to mention somebody else's name. And that's what's going to keep us going forward. That's what leadership looks like as well. And before we open it up for audience questions, because we want to hear what you also want to ask. So start thinking about them now and getting ready to get in the queue if you have a question, because in about a minute, we're coming to audience questions. As you think about yourself, though, and how you're feeling, how you're navigating leadership, how you're navigating the information that everybody else don't know, right? Both the privy information as well as just the realities of your role and your job as leaders, as chief executives. What are you wrestling with the most? What do you wish people knew and understood about the decision making that is having to be made in these times? And that was a question that I did not send to you ahead of time.
Yeah, so look, the first thing that crosses my mind is that coalition building is a key part of advocacy, right? And what I've often found in our community in Massachusetts is that there's many people advocating for independent things, but rarely you have strong coalition building, right? The power of many acting as one, right? And so as we navigate through these uncertain times, it remains critically important, in my view, that you become part of the movement, the coalition building. Don't go at it by yourself, right? Speak up, show up. The fact that you guys will come to events like this, right, is important, right? Being quiet does nothing, right? You need to speak up and find the right venue to speak up and build coalitions and advocate for the right movements in policy at the state and even federal level, right? And I know that our hands are fairly limited at the federal level, but the resistance is real, right? If you don't believe me, ask Bad Bunny, right? 92 million hits on Instagram in 48 hours, the largest ever in the history of Instagram, right? When he announced he was going to the Super Bowl, so.
That's why they mad.
Oh, me next. Oh, great. Okay. So, y'all, I said I was an intermediary, so I'm going to raise the money and then get the money back out. So I just want to make sure y'all know that's clear. So I am in a situationship with philanthropy, which is why I'm an intermediary, because they don't really fully want me in the family. You know, I sit at the kids' table, kind of. But I'm there because what it does allow is for me to push on the edges of where philanthropy needs to go. And so I'm going to start with a couple of things. I have worked with far too many organizations where their mission was outside facing but not inside facing. So for us, it starts with my people who show up every single day to support my leadership, to support the mission, to support the vision. And what that looks like if you don't feel safe, you don't come into work. If you need a day off, you just send a text. I don't need to ask no questions. If you need to leave your role, you know what? I'm gonna support you wholeheartedly because I trust your gut. It's about asking people to bring their full selves to work, and when they do, respecting every single part of them. So for me, that is very important. Our internal processes, limited PTO, all of those things, open door policy. I think when it comes to the outside, I need funders to get off their assets, to be really honest. I think that this is not, we're a small, I'm trying to push my board with our little small $2 million endowment to go up to 12%. And I'm thinking about these larger foundations, y'all, that are sitting on billions. And I can't help but to ask myself, what is the fucking moment you're waiting for? Because I don't have to be an immigrant to feel the fear of my brothers and sisters and those who don't identify as either are feeling, right? I don't have to be from Haiti to feel offended that he called it a shithole country and is now saying none of them can come back here, right? There's things, the connection that I am feeling so deeply to what is happening in this moment, I also feel hope. Tear y'all systems down. They didn't work for us in the first place, so we could build ours. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm excited about. That's what I'm ready for. So I think that leadership for me is about collaboration. It is about openness. It's about love, but it's also about calling out truth to power. And I think right now funders are doing a little too much work trying to figure it out and not getting money out the door when people's lives are literally being ripped apart. And I'm talking about right here. So I'm not talking about down south, y'all. I'm not talking about global south. I'm talking about right here in Lynn, in Boston, in Quincy, in Revere, right, in East Boston, on our streets in Roxbury. Like, we can't have that. So that's...
I mean, can y'all imagine her in those funder meetings telling them, come up off them assets? That's what I'm talking about. That's fundraising 101. If you need a little dose of energy and what would we call it, gravitas, do that.
Well, they don't fund me, so don't use that, y'all.
Be careful, be mindful, but the mission and the message sticks, that there are resources that are in place that need to be unlocked and unleashed, and we need to go and ask for it. We need to go and demand for it as well.
Yeah. So there are a couple things that I kind of struggle with that I don't know, and it wasn't until I was in this position that I had to confront, and one is this notion that every idea isn't a great idea. And my own ideas included, like, oh, this is the thing that we're gonna do, and then I get started trying to do something and I'm out over my skis and see like, oh, we don't have the capacity to actually execute on this. And so, you know, how do you match execution with vision? That is a very real struggle, because in our minds we have a vision of what it is we're trying to do, but we don't have the matching capacity or expertise. So that's a very real thing. But then also there are a lot of people external to the organization that have a lot of ideas that they think are great and seek to impose upon you and get frustrated and criticize you for not doing the thing that they said you should be doing. And that is one of the frustrations. And then, you know, out there, play hating from the sideline. Get your own thing. Why are you watching mine? But realistically, you know, people's like, it's easy. Here's what you do. And it's just like, you're not on the inside, under the hood, seeing all of the different moving parts. And not to say that sometimes you just got to start walking by faith and trusting that everything else will come along with it. But after several runs of walking by faith and it not happening and not actually being called to do that thing, you're like, yeah, oh, I hear you. Yeah, you know what? Shout out to my man P in the back, who's like, he's got a great suggestion. If it's really that good, hit me with a proposal. Because I've had a number of conversations where people are just like, this is the thing to do. Make it happen. I'm like, if it's that great, you should be able to write it down. You should be able to give me a prospectus on what's happening. And if it is, you give me that proposal, I'm going to at least look at it and explore it and have something to pressure test. And then lastly, and this is, you know, one of my own struggles as, a leftist, abolitionist person who is in an organization that is committed to capitalism, right? It is committed through economic development and uplift of the black community through capitalism, which I, personally deeply don't believe in that as the salvific path for us, but I see it as a means and a vehicle. And so reconciling the tension between what I personally feel is what is going to liberate our people and what I see as a current, contemporary, effective means of providing some opportunities for people in our country. That's deeply personal, and I'm hoping that not too many of my board members are watching this. Can we edit this,
And they
Emerson, Paul?
I love it. So let's dive into questions, but this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna call it a lightning round of questions. What that means is the person asking the question, make it quick, lightning, all right? But that's gonna go for our panelists as well. So when y'all answer the question, make it quick, all right? Lightning round, let's do it. Question here? All right. I have an extra one right here.
Do you have any ideas on, I feel like we have to balance this notion that we are a monolith with this let's stick together. And sometimes I think we say we should stick together, but there's nothing else to it, because oftentimes we also don't like feedback. So anyway, what are your thoughts about that balancing?
Came in hot.
I think it's just that. I think it's recognizing the diversity in all of us. It's funny, I was just having a conversation with my friend Eric out here, and he's like, I think what people don't realize is like when you go to Detroit, right? Many of us came from the South, so we have deep Southern roots, right? Boston is very different. We got Caribbean, right? Like we are spicy as hell, right? So where our Black people show up is different. And so I appreciate your question. I think it's that, and what I said to Eric actually just a minute ago is that we don't all have to want the same things. We have to have our eye on a vision that's gonna work for us all. So I think that's the problem, is that we always think we have to come to the table and everybody gotta sing Kumbaya. We don't. Maybe some of us just want to get the fuck out of this era right now, and so you're going to rock with us for 3 years and do what you need to do, but then after that you want to check out because you're going to be tired. Maybe some of us want to have conversations with our Latino sisters and brothers, right, to figure out what happened, how can we help you see a different side, what was your side? I think the problem is that we do still think about ourselves as a monolith. I'm going to wrap this up because I feel some eyes on me, but I think where our real work is to be vulnerable and to come up with a vision we can all work towards.
I think it's a great question, Monica. I'll keep it quick. The Latino countries, there's 16, 17 Latino countries in South America that are all suffering through this. So there's no more heterogeneous group than the Latino community. But I always say that in the times of adversity, right, unity is what drives progress, right? And that message has resonated pretty well, right? Arguably, we could do it across the people of color groups, right? Because right now, we need our collective voices to be heard loudly, right? Civil disobedience is real. If we get to a point that this nation gets into a constitutional challenge, a real constitutional challenge, we might have to take the streets, right? And I'll be proudly do that. I'll be proud to do that.
I'll just say quickly that it is about identifying the malady that afflicts us all. And having an open table for as many people to come together. Everybody's not going to agree on everything, but if we can consolidate around the things that we do agree on, there's the greatest opportunity for success.
Love it. Open table. Another question?
Over here. Oh, can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, what's up? This is Derek Hayes. Hey, Natanya, how you doing? All right, we're Global Leaders of Boston. My question to you guys, are you willing to accept the 5-year strategy from us?
Accept a what?
5-year strategy.
Are we willing to accept a 5-year strategy from you?
Global Leaders, yeah. Will you be willing to review it?
Yes. Accept it, to review it, read it. That's what you mean, right?
Speak to me.
Are you asking us to accept something to read and review?
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would absolutely do that.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Collaboration. So they're going to review the strategy and follow up with you and see where it goes. I would ask more about the strategy, but we don't have time. Next question.
Hey y'all, my name is Gladys. So I have a question for all of you. Thinking back when you were a young careerist, early careerist, what advice would you give your younger self?
Take risks. No hanky, no panky, right? There are things I would have done when I was your age that I would certainly not do now, right? But I've had a lot to lose now, very little to lose then, right? So I think early in your career, look, the obvious choices in my mind are always seek mentorship, right? But take risks, informed risks, not crazy risks, but take risks. To be at home thinking about doing something and watching TV is not gonna get you anywhere. You gotta take risks, you have to do.
I would say really quick, I started at the Boston Foundation as an executive assistant working under Robert Louis Jr., one of my greatest mentors.
Yes.
And it was one of the hardest jobs of my life, y'all. But also, that's where I started. That title didn't have nothing to do with my purpose. I kept in them meetings, writing all those notes, going back to Robert, and be like, they're not talking about the people. We would have these conversations. So your title does not mean a thing. You get to lead from wherever you're at.
The thing that I would say is stay rooted and to community and serve community, because no matter where you are going in the corporate setting, even in the nonprofit setting, if you're not grounded in the people that you're serving or the people that you come from, there's a slight risk that you become a liability to those communities.
So real.
Can I add a thought to that, if I may? Right. The first 15 years of my career, I was disconnected from my community. And this is a personal story. I don't know, I knew something was missing from my life, but I don't know what it was, right? But back to your question, stay close to your community. That's a really important part, in my view, of personal growth.
Did we have one more over there?
Hi, I'm Leslie Ford. I'm the founder of Mom's Hierarchy of Needs. Curious, one of the issues that I've been focused on is how the disproportionate toll of parenting and caregiving and unpaid work hits our communities, not just for women, but more broadly. And the health tax we pay is a tax on our opportunities and on our financial growth. And I'm curious if you are seeing windows to use health as a wedge issue that provides cohesive involvement for all of our organizations.
Let's have one of you respond only.
So, health as a wedge issue I think there's a great opportunity to leverage collective interests around wellness in our community. And you're right, we bear the disproportionate burden of health outcomes, and it manifests in many ways, and it is sourced from many places. And so I think that is a way of bridging some divides that exist in our community, but because I don't know how present of mind it is for as many people, and I think it would take a lot of work to build a movement, a broad-based movement around that. But not saying that it can't be done. There are folks who are doing health advocacy and organizing around health, and I think that needs to continue, and the more that we broaden the conversation to tie it to the social determinants of health, and even broader the social determinants of community well-being, the more effective we'll be. And so I will say to you and other leaders in here who are concerned about health and advocating around health, I'm reminded of Queen Esther, who was in a particular position, for my Bible scholars in the room, that was faced with a challenge and the threats to her people. And her uncle Mordecai said, if you don't come forward right now, someone else will, but you will perish. You have been brought to this moment for such a time as this. And so for the leaders in this room who are concerned about whatever the issue, be it health or be it financial well-being or the safety and protection of our community, you have been called to this moment, and you have been called to leadership for such a time as this. And so step into that leadership.
Come on here.
You ain't wrap that up. Put a bow on that.
That's what I'm talking about. And y'all take that energy and don't let it die. Lean into it, because that is exactly the spirit that would drive us forward to infinity and beyond. And thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much for your leadership for this moment. And before we close off stage, I need everybody to sit up still real quick, because we're often moving 100 miles per hour and we done said all this stuff, and some of y'all gonna leave and forget everything that was just said. So I want you to take a moment and slow your busy selves down. Sit up still. Stop fidgeting, stop texting, whatever you're doing. Take yourself serious in this moment, right now. To reflect on everything that you've heard, but everything you're experiencing, and at the same time, everything you are grateful for. And I just want you to take a deep inhale. Hold it. And exhale. All of the stuff that is racing through your minds, let it go, let it ease, and hold on to what you're feeling in this moment. One more deep inhale. Hold it. And exhale. All right, keep going. Keep being great, y'all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Another round of applause. Okay, we're going to keep this party going. I would now like to bring to the stage Anas Tarabi, who is going to share insights from McKinsey & Company's latest research in America on the impact on low-income families and solutions around housing that can address the shortage to accelerate economic mobility for communities. Thank you.
Family, thank you for letting us be here. I love the idea of keeping the party going. I'm about to talk to you about economics of housing. I don't know how party-like I can make that, but I will try. Before I get into the content, let me introduce myself a little bit and explain to you why I'm talking to you about this topic. So, my name's Anas. I'm a partner at McKinsey & Company right now. As the accent often gives away, I'm not from around these parts originally. So yes, this is a British accent. I feel like that make me the diversity token Brit on stage today. I'm going to present to you some work that we've done at McKinsey through our Institute for Economic Mobility, which I'll explain in a second, on housing and the link between housing and economic prosperity. I think for me, housing is a deeply personal topic. And it's personal for a few reasons. So my background is I was born in the UK. I was raised to parents that were escaping a civil war in Sudan. And we spent a lot of my early childhood in a place of relative housing insecurity. And I got to experience firsthand just how much of a lottery where you were born, where you were raised, and where you live had on your outcomes. And in some ways, I always felt like I'd won the lottery because I had cousins in a war-torn country. But as I aged and as I grew up further, and I began to see just the ways that endowment effect, that wealth transfer that I saw happening in British society linked to people who came from families that had secure places to live, had property that they could pass down, and the way that played out just over 20, 30 years in terms of impact and opportunity, I remember just thinking this is a source of profound injustice in society. And it feels so intractable at times. It feels so impossible to take the concept of housing affordability and make it something that we can act upon. So what I want to talk to you about today is some of the dry economic side of that equation. And to give you guys a sense, not just on what the challenge is, not just on why it matters, but also talk about the fact that there are real solutions. There are really great examples, and there are things that we can do individually, but more importantly, collectively, that can create greater prosperity for our communities through engaging on housing. And so to get you there, I make no apology. I'm going to show you some numbers, and we're going to do some math, right? Because the place we have to come from on this is from a place of solidity and confidence in our fact base. You know, there's a saying that in God we trust, everyone else brings data. That's something that we at McKinsey and I personally believe in. So we're going to run the data. But what I'd love for us to do at the end as well is then get into a conversation. And I'd love to hear from you guys, the human reflection on some of this, the policy reflections on some of this. I'm already excited for the fiery questions that might come based on the way the last panel piped out, but you know, I feel like I can trust you guys and I'm in good hands. So with that said, let me switch to slides. I'm hoping that this now means that somebody will activate my slides up. Phenomenal. Perfect. So first, I want to tell you who I'm speaking on behalf of and what the basis for our perspective is. So the McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility is an evolution of an institute that we started 6 years ago as the McKinsey Institute for Black Economic Mobility. And that came out of a desire for us to take what we were able to do as a global consulting firm with a deep heritage in strategy, working with some of the most successful companies and governments globally, and bring some of that capability to bear on a topic that we felt, many of us as Black partners felt was underserved, which is what can we actually do to increase the economic well-being of the African American community and Black Americans. And it's a sign of success that think tank that we established within McKinsey was so successful it began blueprinting actually a recipe for developing thought, knowledge, and action suggestions around economic mobility more broadly. So we've broadened, and we are now the McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility. And you'll see as we talk through materials today, a lot of what I'll talk about is how this issue affects Black and African American communities. But there are clear analogs and extensions to other communities of color and other communities that find themselves socially disadvantaged. And then we can talk about geographic intersectionality as well. But when you compound the combination of historical structural challenges associated with race, with rurality, with climate change, you begin to see that there are real communities that actually face some of these challenges even more. So look, what we do is we first develop a fact base, we orchestrate and bring other people's research together, and what you will see hopefully on each of the slides is a clear acknowledgement of who we are referencing. We shape that into a clear narrative, and then we try and put forward sensible solutions for discussion and debate and action by others. And this is very separate from what we do as a consulting firm. Yep. This is not pro bono, this is thought capital, and it's one of our 3 principal think tanks that we have associated with McKinsey & Company. All right, so let's just start off with establishing the fact base. I'm going to show you some things that you already know, but again, we're going to put math to it and numbers. Although, for some reason, you're going to have to use your imaginations because the lines are missing from this. There is a really big and growing gap between the median household income for Black African American families, white non-Hispanic families, and Hispanic families. And maybe this might be just an exercise in imagination, but just have a look at the empty slide and guess where you think the lines go. And just say that they're all normalized to 2022 numbers, right? So they all start off, with a bit of a gap around about 1992. I'll tell you, by the time that you get to 2025, you are looking at a 4.5-fold increase in median household wealth. And that's median. That's, you line up everybody, all the families in each of these communities, end to end. You start at family number 1. You go to the family at the 10th percentile, the 20th, the 30th, the 40th, the 50th, and we stop and we measure there. And we find that Black and African American communities are much less wealthy by an order of magnitude. And that gap is only increasing as the general wealth in society increases. And we map this out to a couple of years post-COVID, but there is no narrowing of that gap that is happening latently. By the way, this is a simplified number because we're starting off with what's the household wealth for the middle of the distribution. when we actually look at what's the proportion of families that have zero wealth or negative wealth, again, the numbers are shocking, and I will not preempt that because they're coming up shortly. The second fact that we always want to bring, though, to bear is to say it's not just enough to say that there is a disparity. It's a disparity that hurts everybody. Because if we were to work as a society and an economy collectively to close that disparity, we would add trillions of dollars to the economy. And that's not trillions of dollars in the pockets of one particular community or another. When you create a consumer who's able to demand and consume goods and services, everything that they consume benefits. When you create jobs for housing construction, as we'll come on to later, you're creating jobs for everybody. You're not making these jobs conditional of membership of that community. So for us, a little bit the opportunity here, and if we don't grasp it, the tragedy, is that we can enrich all of society by closing these racial wealth gaps. So set against that, we then think about, okay, how does wealth flow? And I can see that these slides are all going to be missing their critical data points. So I'm going to have to talk you through this, and we're just going to have to use our imaginations together. This analysis tries to show when we think about the transfer of wealth from one generation to another, how does that typically take place? Or where does wealth come from? And it's an interesting question for yourself, like where does your personal wealth come from? Well, some of it comes from your own income, the stuff that you earn in your lifetime. And naively growing up, that's where I thought everybody's wealth came from. I just assumed people got jobs, and you save, and you spend effectively, and you do your best to get a good job, and you'll end up okay, right? And that's the kind of meritocratic dream that we often pitch to our children. 60% of wealth is inherited, intergenerational transfer. And if you don't have that wealth to pass on, and that wealth is accruing in other communities, it just compounds and compounds. So when you look at that wealth disparity gap that we're looking at, so much of this is about inheritance and intergenerational transfer. And this is why housing becomes important, because in the imaginary 60% chart that you're not seeing, I promise you we will make a PDF version of these slides available for you guys to download and access. We also have all of this stuff on our institute website. But a big chunk of that is wealth transfer that is either directly related to housing, the inheritance of a house that you can then either live in or sell, or it's wealth that's built off the stability that comes from home ownership. Again, I'm telling you things that you already know, in theory with data. At least the numbers have made it, even if none of the colors have. It's not just that housing is a source of wealth, it is also a determinant of wealth. So we're going to talk about housing affordability as we go through here, and I want you to just anchor on one idea, one number. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, identifies overburden on housing costs for any household that is spending more than 30% of their income on housing, right? 30%, that's kind of like the number to trigger on, right? So if an individual household is having to spend more than 30% of the income they have coming in on their housing, they are housing overburdened. By the way, when I first came across that as a topic, that blew my mind, because I cannot remember a time growing up where housing wasn't like well north of that figure for us as a family. And I will tell you one of the realities of my story. Again, I will just personalize this a little bit. I have an income now that I could never have dreamed of. My mom had one like rich uncle, like rich to us. And as the cousins, right, we'd always like go around to his house and ask him, you know, Uncle Khalid, like how'd you get rich? Uncle Khalid, how'd you get money, right? And he would like dismiss us and shoo us away, because very religious family didn't want us idolizing money. But he said one thing which has turned out to be super true. He said, the one thing you need to know about money, boys, is it is a social animal, right? If you only have a small amount of it, it'll get lonely, and it wants to run to where all the other money is. And when you begin to get wealthy and you have a lot of money, everybody else's money comes to you, and it's just easy that way. And I will tell you that my own personal journey of acquiring wealth, that is insanely true. And one of the principal reasons that it's true is that the second you are not having to spend the majority of your money on just putting a safe roof over your family's household, you can begin to start playing that investing game. You can begin to start saving. And by the investing, I mean not scratch cards, right? Like you can actually formally think about where would I allocate my capital, yeah? So in so many ways, we are holding back the economic potential and freedom of individuals by burdening them with very high housing costs. And maybe, I don't know if this is being recorded, so how truthful I can be, but maybe in Q&A we can talk about why housing costs are so high. So let's move on to what the opportunity is here. We think there is an enormous opportunity, a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity to unlock economic mobility for all Americans. And I just want you to just anchor on this idea from an economic rationalism perspective. When you help some of the most disadvantaged, most historically disenfranchised and excluded communities to access the economy, to participate in the economy, to be more successful in the economy, you strengthen the economy more for everybody. Yeah. And we can talk again later on, is capitalism the right route forwards? It is the route that we all live with. And so for our perspective as McKinsey, we will operate within the constraints of the reality that we engage in. So let's talk about the challenge of housing and economic mobility. We'll talk about the opportunity, and then we'll come on to some bold solutions. So maps. Thank goodness this rendered. I don't know how I'd describe this one to you verbally. US counties, but you knew that. Color scheme on here is meant to show what's for the average typical household, or for all the households aggregating these counties, what percentage of their household income are they having to spend on housing? Remember that, right? So how much of the money coming into that household do they have to put on creating some degree of basic human security for themselves and their family members? And the darkest blue here is the 20 to 54. So wherever you see that darkest blue, sorry, over 29%. So this is that HUD definition of overburden. And you can see the geographic distribution of that, right? And what do we see? We see California and the West Coast there's a real affordability issue there. You can see Southern Texas, real affordability issue there. You see the Northeast, like anyone recognize that? Like, of course, real affordability issue there. But we also see this crescent that goes from the Carolinas through to Oklahoma to North Texas. I'm someone who does a lot of work on health equity at McKinsey, and I spend a lot of time mapping social determinants and outcomes for different communities. You know what's super interesting, and again, grab me in the bar after this and I'll show you the map. If you take just a map of the US like this and you layer on like a color for every county that is in the bottom 20% of a critical social determinant, income, education, health outcomes, access to primary care, access to reliable financial institutions, food deserts. If you just color those colors again and again, you'll get this pattern. You always get this pattern. This, for me, is the pattern of social inequality in the US that you can see from space. And I don't think I have to explain to this community what that crescent represents, what the scar that crescent represents, what the historical precedent that led to that particular crescent location that goes from the Carolinas through to northern Texas, around the Panhandle. This is an opportunity and a challenge that you can literally see from space. So, let's put the pieces together on this. We're talking about housing and economic mobility because housing is a critical determinant of how people spend their money. And if you can make it more affordable, more accessible, you can liberate people to put their money in places that deliver greater personal, social, and societal return, right? You stimulate the broader economy when people are having to pay less to landlords, when they're having to pay less to people that own property. We also find that the burden that we talked about, that overburden, is much higher amongst Black and African American communities. So 47% of Black households are overburdened on costs of housing compared with 33% of the national average. Where you live doesn't just shape what's in your pocket, it shapes the opportunity for you to generate your income as well. So economic opportunity is super tightly linked to that. Some of you may be familiar with the Moving to Opportunity study, the work done by folks like Raj Chetty and Nathan Hendren at Harvard, studying what the impact is on place and location. Really interesting study that looked at the impact of voucher schemes that allowed families to move from poorer areas to wealthier areas. Like really kind of like highly thought through, very robust economic scientific analysis. demonstrates to a high degree of satisfaction amongst people who think about this stuff really hard, that if you can move on up, your children's lifetime opportunities and the next generation's opportunities improve. So geography is destiny, not just for that generation, but other generations coming forwards. Health also affects health and well-being, and the 33% here that you're seeing is the answer to a question in the US Community Health Survey, which asks individuals, to what extent do you think where you live essentially damages your health or has a negative effect on your health? And it is 33% higher for Black and African American respondents to say yes to that question compared to non-white Hispanic respondents. And I keep on making this point again, but this was the aha and the unlock. This was the thing that was behind the curtain that I didn't understand growing up that I now understand. You are kept generationally in a position of disadvantage unless you can get into that game where housing is part of what you're transferring through. So, the numbers tell the story. There's two straight lines that underpin this. We are facing in the US right now a growing housing crisis. We think that round about now there's an 8 to 8.5 million household shortage in terms of what we need to supply to households, and we think that grows over time. And if we localize that even more to the sort of Boston metro area, we think that we're looking at a shortage of housing units in the Boston metropolitan statistical area, sort of Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Metro West, all of those areas, of by about 60,000. And, in a way, this gives me both concern and hope, because, 60,000 is a big number, but could I imagine us in Massachusetts building 60,000 additional houses? Could I imagine that there could be a set of policies and community activities that we could do that could drive that? I actually think we could. I actually think this is achievable in maybe a timeline of decades, maybe a decade, right? But with concerted action, we could do that. So why do we see this, though? What are the underlying drivers? And I'll give you the drivers that came out from our research. So the first is super high land costs, land and building costs. Something like 75% of the available housing stock and places that you have capacity to build housing are in zoning areas that require single-family houses. And single-family houses are increasingly becoming a social luxury that actually block out the opportunity to build housing for many more families. Places that have demonstrably driven an impact by closing the housing opportunity gap do it through multi-occupancy building and multifamily housing. So that local policy that says keep this place in a single-family only situation is a critical driver here. But that's not the only part of it. The other part of it is actually the input costs into building houses have gone up over time. And so you'll see when we come to solutions, we need solutions at the policy level, but we also need it at the supply chain level. There's got to be some way of addressing this 40% rise in the cost of materials to build a house. And there is, and we'll come to it later, but it's prefabrication and it's new novel techniques and approaches there. What else is the challenge? Well, the other challenge we have is that the actual market that builds affordable housing is failing. And I use that term of failure from an economics lens. It fails because there is demand for affordable housing. There is potentially even the funding and resourcing available to invest in affordable housing, but the providers, the companies that know how to build affordable housing, aren't starting up projects. And that's because they don't feel confident that the economic return is going to be there. So what does this chart, and again, I've got lots of pieces missing, but I'll give you the verbal on it. What does this chart show? It shows if you look at the top 25 housing developers across the US in 2023, all of them started new projects. As you'd expect, there's a massive housing shortage. If you say what percentage of the top 25 affordable housing developers felt the economic confidence to start a new project in 2023, it is a fraction of that. It is about 4%. So if we can do something that gets that group of companies, and by the way, these are often social enterprises, right? Community trust-based companies. If we can make it more viable for them to open up and build stock, then we'll have part of a solution there as well. The third part is just related to wealth. And there is this kind of, this toxic circle that runs around with households who struggle to afford housing. And they struggle to afford housing because their incomes are low. And the fact that their incomes are low means that a high proportion of their incomes then go on housing, which means that their ability to access the kind of capital or financial instruments that might help them break that cycle is diminished. And this compounding cycle over time is one of the critical things that we have to kind of block, but we have to acknowledge limited incomes for these families is a challenge. Addressable, but it's a challenge. And I'm going to skip past this a little bit. Again, we'll have to do this with the correctly shown charts, but what this slide basically tells you is that challenge that I just laid out just gets worse the lower the income of the household, right? So if it's a problem for like the second to bottom 20%, right? So not the bottom 20%, but the next one, it is even worse for the bottom 20%. So these reinforcing, constricting cycles are something that we need to address. And this is where I'm just going to step back for a second and just offer a personal reflection. So one of the differences from the UK and the US is in the UK, we recognize that we have a hereditary monarchy. I will make no further comment about where the US is right now on that front. But it's built in from you, from birth, that there is this job in the United Kingdom called king or queen that none of y'all are qualified for unless you came out of the right uterus, right? Like it's just, and we just accept that as a society. We're like, okay, cool. There is this thing called inborn privilege. And then we have like the House of Lords. Do you guys know this about the UK, that our second chamber, called the House of Lords, right? It's like our Senate. None of them are elected. Like, and we've reformed it a bit, but there's a chunk of them that still have it because like they inherited it from someone in their family. So we sort of accept that, and we have this sense that sometimes where you end up in life isn't about how hard you worked as an individual. It's down to the fact that we structure society in an ordered way. The promise of the American dream, I think, sometimes is that idea that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make it. And I think when we talk about solutions, we've got to be really clear-eyed. Like, what can an individual in society do? What can an individual family and a household do? How much can we hold you responsible for your ability to access housing, given the structural challenges? And then if we're honest about that, we can then realize where we need to engage on to find these solutions. And that's why, again, when we get to the solutions part of this talk, and we will get there, you're going to hear us talk about policy. You're going to hear us talk about industry. We're going to talk about things that are above the level of individual responsibility. Okay, this is my last bad news bear slide, I promise, before we get onto the upswing, because I can feel like I've definitely undone the party vibe we had going. Again, this will not surprise you guys, but as somebody who has worked on issues of social justice, social equity, particularly in the context of health, that's my background, I'm a physician by background, but increasingly now on broader economic mobility, I always come to the table with very specific facts and data, because the thing I do not want to do is have a debate with you about a reality that is easily demonstrable in data. So this is what this map is showing. It is showing you, if you cross over two things, cross over where are the most housing disadvantaged, i.e. communities where there is the most unaffordable housing, i.e. they're spending over that 30%, with where do we have highest concentrations of Black and African American individuals. And by the way, we could extend this with Hispanic Latino, and you would get a slight addition of a few counties. We could expand it to Native and indigenous peoples communities as well, and those would pop up, and you'd see the the reservations in Nevada and Oklahoma popping up as well. But if we overlay those two things, we can see that there is a concentration of housing unaffordability in communities where Black African Americans are in the majority. So, this is one of those situations where we can argue if you address this problem nationwide, you will help everybody, but you will definitely help these communities. Okay, no more doom and gloom. Now the opportunity with an adorable little picture of, so we had a little boy last year, my son's 16 months, he's just phenomenal, 98th centile, doesn't sleep, eats like a trooper. I can't remember the last time I had a good night's bed. What is wild to me about this picture, by the way, is that the mother is drawing on the wall. My little boy learned to hold a pen last week. Our walls are fully decorated with stuff, right? So this is not role modeling the right kind of thing for them. There is a problem so big we can see it from space. There is an opportunity so big that we can see it from space. There is a $1.9 trillion GDP growth opportunity and a 1.7 million job creation opportunity if we chose as a nation to address the housing affordability crisis. And I'm just going to say this again, 1.9 trillion onto GDP growth on our economy. Let me put that in context for you. The global economy right now is about $85 trillion. All the values of goods and services traded globally. The US is a big chunk of that, right? Let's imagine it's half. This is adding real points on the package to the economy. This is growth that you would feel as a country. And 1.7 million additional jobs is growth that households and communities would feel. We start with this very often at the Institute because, again, what we don't want to do is get into a debate that suggests that addressing some of these issues is about being a charitable neighbor. We're not against that. Really important part of what we should all do and how we should organize society. But even if you don't care about that, even if you are the most Ayn Rand reading, capitalist focus, like show me the money, humans are just a form of creating opportunity, this should speak to you. And if this isn't speaking to you and driving you to action, well, there is a deeper source of irrationality that requires a solution that we as a think tank don't have. Let's localize that opportunity, though, again. Again, if we just translate that to the greater Boston area, and we think about closing those 63,000 home gap, we're adding $15 billion nearly to the regional economy, and we're creating 11,000 jobs. And this is just Boston metro area, you know. And we could probably do a version of this clicking all the way down to neighborhood levels. And sometimes I wonder whether that's what we should do. Let's bring those facts and data. I'm not naive enough to think that it'll ever be enough, but I think it might help, and I think it might bring a different type of conversation. Okay, so how do we get there? How do we actually close that gap? I'm going to give you the perspective of us as a think tank, and then I'm going to stop and break for questions. We did some pretty extensive research into this, and we found that there were 5 best bet ideas that we think would close this gap significantly. And I'll double click on a few of these. But the first is, if land access is an issue, one of the greatest gifts that this country has is land. And I say that coming from, historically, a very small island country where we pack people in like force of the space. There's no way in the UK you would have this many empty seats. You've been pushed to a smaller room because we just don't have the space. But what can we do to create incentives to unlock partnership, to unlock that land, right? And we do think it is about partnership. We do think it is about creating the right incentives, and we do think that both policy and collaboration are ways that we can get there. The second piece is we actually think you need to unlock the power of private capital on this. There are many, many examples where if you can leverage and accelerate private capital, and by the way, private capital doesn't necessarily mean I need to be careful not to mention any potential clients of my own firm, but a very large, famous institution who have been in the news for private equity-backed scoops-ups of single-family housing. Private capital, when you look at models, especially in other countries, it's often about providing appropriate loan and financing to these community investment trusts that are going to lead and take the risk on that. And by the way, because housing is such a durable good, I'll use some economics terms again, because when people live in a house, they tend to always have someone living there for a very long time, it can produce a very reliable and very attractive set of low-risk cash flows, right? So if you can do some of the financial engineering that gets the right money to the right person, the right place, you can actually create, for a lot of this affordable housing challenge, the win-win of somebody who's building housing, somebody who is owning that housing and making it available, and communities that can access that housing in a price-efficient way. Again, not naive enough to think it is the magic bullet or a single solution, but when we calculate how many homes it could add, it is in the order of about 300,000. The third thing we see as a major opportunities of technology innovation that we've seen really founded initially in other countries, and there's a huge prefabrication capability and culture in Europe that really comes from rebuilding Europe after the Second World War. Many countries in Europe experienced devastating in-country destruction of housing stock as a result of the Second World War. And there was a need in the 1950s and 60s to just rapidly fix and correct that. And there are so many lessons from a country like Germany, where you had cities like Dresden that were almost essentially wiped out of housing stock, and they were able to rebuild rapidly housing in a way that would basically lower the cost per unit house and increase volume and supply, that actually creates a more stable housing market and reduces housing insecurity. So there's a bunch of technological innovation which allows us to scale off home construction and prefabrication that we are pretty excited about. One of the other levers that we see that we also see as being very effective is making co-investment an opportunity. So look, a house isn't something that you can either buy or not buy. Shared equity schemes have been phenomenally successful in many places. There's been a little bit of a challenge of making sure that the right households and communities access them. But there are many, many successful examples in the US and abroad where local policymakers are willing to provide the opportunity for shared equity, right to buy schemes, partial ownership, expansion of, for those of you at the BMC Equity Conference a couple of years ago, there's a phenomenal talk about a not-for-profit organization in Philadelphia that helped people access an existing program within HUD that allows you as a long-term Section 9 renter to begin to purchase your property. All of these things can address that, because you may not need to own 100% of a house or of a flat or of an apartment to benefit from the economic foundation that gives you. So what can we do to encourage and support that shared equity and partial ownership models? And then finally, and I won't say too much about this, but revamping housing choice. Families are often in a really good position to know, given a set of budgetary constraints and market opportunities, what the best that they can do for themselves and their families are. And if you can liberalize that, if you can give individual families more choice in where they seek housing, you can provide some gentle pressure to improve those housing markets. Look, we've got a few examples of this, but rather than go through these, I think what I'm probably going to do is pause and see what discussion you guys want to have and where you want to go with this. The last thing I will leave you with is just a couple of quick QR codes up here. One is the QR code for the full report. And by the way, the full report has a phenomenally good interactive website that you scroll down and creates this interactive map, and it's just like chef's kiss, much better and more interesting than a dull dude with a British accent at the front of a room. And then the other QR code is for the link to the McKinsey Institute for Economic Mobility, and you can see our research that we published there. And with that, I'm going to humbly say thank you for letting me be up here and open to the floor for questions.
Two. Thank you. Very, very insightful and interesting. So would you characterize the opportunity as or the need or the focus as an individual focus? We have to focus on this individual, or is it a community or governmental? Because the challenge around housing availability, we have companies making choices now. They're building single-family homes and they're going out on the rental market, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a over-index with individuals now renting versus buying. And so we as a community, we're probably caught up in that as well. So what is the solution? Is it for us to kind of start thinking differently, not riding the same wave that we see going on in the greater community with the rental versus the buying? Are you suggesting us to kind of pivot our mindset, continue on that path of home ownership? Because historically that's been the path forward, right, to wealth building. So just a perspective on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to connect this to some prior research that we did on economic mobility more broadly and financial empowerment, particularly focused on Black and African American communities. So what can you do as an individual? We found that there are a few pieces on this. Housing is actually one of those issues that is profoundly, and I mean this small p rather than partisan p, political. Because so much of what determines the housing availability, the stock, the economics of it, are decisions made in city halls, right? And city halls are often more accessible to us than Congress may well be, right? Than distant remote setting bodies are. I don't know that I could get a meeting at the Department of Housing and Urban Development to talk about my opinion on policy there, but I probably can engage my city rep. And I think one of the things, and I'll speak from my home community back in the UK, right, my first community, and now fully settled in Boston for those of you that are worried about it, go Celtics, and somehow managed to pass the citizenship exam earlier this year, so, you know, oh country, my country. My home community failed to engage in small p politics. We failed to exercise our democratic mandate, and we never brought that pressure to bear. I think one of the wonderful things about the US is we do have this hyper-localized version of politics and policy. And this is where both individuals and collective voice can be super powerful. So we've seen this in Massachusetts. We've seen it through the linking of policies around transport access. And I skipped past this. This was also the Denver case study, where a state legislature says, look, we're going to invest in expanding our transport capabilities and our transport options. We're going to expend MTA funding, build out new lines. But by the way, you other residential communities, as we come to you, we know two things will happen. One, me building that transit center will boost your house prices and home values, right? Because living near transit makes homes more expensive. And so we want you guys to mitigate that. And so we want to say, look, our funding of that transport is linked to you also supporting multi-generational, multi-family, multi-occupancy dwelling. I know it's not the strongest margin, but actually that is one example of where people power really is driving it. I think the second piece that I think we've learned from our research on economic mobility is the responsibility for economic literacy and financial literacy. You know, we could localize it anywhere else, but it's always going to rest with us. And there are phenomenal resources in our communities that are able to help and support us on this, right? I mean, one action item I took away from the conference 2 years ago was actually participating through some of my community activity to develop and provide like financial education seminars and discussion sessions with young people, right? And why is that? Look, the cards are stacked against our community very often if we're super honest about it. The best way we can navigate that is by being informed on where there are paths. So I do think that sense of personal financial literacy, understanding how these things work, knowing what a mortgage is, knowing why it might be better to rent, when it's better to rent, when it's better to buy, how you might get exposure to some wealth creation capability through how you live. All of these pieces are pieces that we can educate on. And does it make the game fairer? No. Does it solve all the issues? No. But might it help reduce that compounding that we see in those bottom two quartiles of continual lack of access to resources, lack of access to opportunity? It could. But the last piece that I will say is, there is, as a community, our voice still carries weight, right? It carries weight when we bring it collectively. There is a depth of sophistication to the argument that I think we believe Black and communities of color could bring when they advocate, which will really shift outcomes. You know, one of the things that we hope from the Institute is when we put a report like this up and online, that this just makes it much easier for you to email it to your state rep and say, look, I would like to come and talk to you about what I can do to make housing more affordable for the next generation of my community. I read this, I thought it was interesting, would love to see what you think of some of the ideas. What we're trying to do as we publish this research is empower communities to take that conversation to the next step. And I think if we can keep on doing that, if we can keep on, and as we as McKinsey can show what the economic opportunity is for the private sector to get involved here, maybe on the margin, maybe in places like Massachusetts, we can make that movement really happen.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. My name is Jenny JB. I am a money coach working towards becoming a financial therapist, and my husband and I also work with first-time home buyers, helping them to get into homes. So one of the things that is interesting to me, outside of just being in the financial space, understanding money trauma, is realizing that I'm a child of immigrant. My first paycheck was the family's, my first big girl job was the family's big girl job, right? Like our income is not only supporting those here, but also those probably in a different country. And one of the issues that I'm finding is not just home affordability, but also staying once you get inside of the home. Is there resources or plans that you have in place or working towards gathering folks together in order to support not only those who get into the home, but staying in the home, is my question.
Yeah. It's a really good question. Look, I think about when we try and think about housing affordability and access, and we think about communities, we broadly think about 3 buckets of folks, right? So there's a lucky bucket of folks that have got to a place, and I say lucky, doesn't mean they haven't worked hard to get there, of housing stability and security, and are on a path where they can maintain it. There's a much larger part of the community that is not in a position of housing security and stability, or even accessing the benefits of something like home ownership, and then there is this transitional group. And so the first thing I want to say is it is really important that we help that transitional group be successful, because, again, and this comes down to part of the discussion on that was happening at the last panel, if we as a community hold the idea that if and as and when we solve our own personal challenge, that we actually engage to help others through, then that transitional group, helping them transition and stay transitioned to a place of stability, becomes super critical. So what are the solutions that we've identified both through research that can help that? A lot of these come down to actually, and again, super boring but super important, what was the nature of the finance that those individuals had access to, right? So my colleagues don't like it when I use the phrase predatory finance, because we saw a lot of financial companies and none of them would ever be predatory, so I won't use that phrase. But imagine that there are products that you can offer that aren't amazing value, right? That have built into them, almost by design, elements of the product that make it harder for that individual to stay compliant with a contract or a mortgage or a loan. And then also imagine that you also, for your wealthiest clients, do the basic opposite. This is back to my Uncle Khalid's wisdom, right? Where the wealthier you are, the better the terms are there. That's the root challenge that we actually think that we need to address. What are the tools for doing that? Clearly policy and advocacy, bringing our voice together, engaging. That is one tool. The US, as I learned in my citizenship exam, is a capitalist country built on an idea of capitalism. Our work on financial inclusion demonstrated, much like we've done with housing and security, that there's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity there. We found that serving the black consumer with better financial products, better suited to their needs and capabilities and economic situation, is also a win-win. So what do? We have worked with a set of financial institutions and clients that want to serve that market better, and we try and help them understand how do you access that market, how do you serve them, how do you build ways of engaging that work. By the way, spoiler alert, do you know how you get black consumers to open an account at your bank? You just have a bank in their neighborhood, and then when they need a bank, they come to your bank. It's pretty straightforward, actually. It's like, don't even need to pay us millions of dollars for that. So those are the things that we can do at a system level. I love your job. I love what you're doing. Because that empowerment of individuals on those elements of financial literacy, and we talk about financial literacy like it's an intelligence-based thing. It's not, right? Managing money is just like understanding some basic rules of thumb that everybody else does. And it's like this weird set of secrets that if you never know, and I've gone from like a family that, we lived well in a loving, faith-based family that I deeply appreciate my childhood from. But we literally lived by the grace of God. I think that's part of the reason my parents may have been so religious, right? And I've transitioned to that to a place where I actually have to proactively and intelligently manage financial flows because, like you, I have the privilege of being able to support many more people, but it means that I now need to make sure that those dollars go everywhere they can do. Man, the secret between those two states was probably learning 8 specific lessons well and applying them. And so as a community, again, we can make that knowledge ours. It does not have to be a other culture idea that we know how to compare the APY versus APR on a loan, right? It does not have to be another culture thing to be able to understand when an auto loan or a lease purchase agreement may not be the right thing, pretty often not, right? Auto leasing in this country, let me not get myself fired. So it is both that top-down policy and market, and that in the community aligning ourselves and educating ourselves and supporting one another to make it. And then, and maybe this is the last piece that comes out of some of our consumer-driven research. We have, and again, there is no homogenous Black American community. As a Sudanese offspring, like half Asian, half Black, half British, American. I'm super aware of that. But culturally, sometimes within some of the subsets of our communities, the ways that we share our success with one another are limited, and there's almost sometimes a sense of either shame or a desire not to explain to other people what you know. What's fantastic to see, by the way, is it's being shattered by the upcoming generation who are just like on TikTok every 5 minutes being like, let me tell you all about your finances and how to do better. So I have real hope for the future, but you know, for any of you that have made a smart decision, that have got to a place of stability, that have something to pass on and give, I just implore you to do it, right? Like, I have been adopted into, and I'm now hopefully a card-carrying member of Black American culture. I have an African American son now, the thing that I never dreamed I might have growing up. And one of the things I deeply love about our community and our culture is the extent to which we share and teach one another. And so let's just make this part of what we teach about as well.
Hi, I just wanted to say I really appreciated your talk today. I think originally you said your family is from Sudan. Shout out, I'm from Zimbabwe, so a fellow brother. But the number that stood out the most for me when you talked about 60% of wealth is done through generational transfer. One of the things I found just being an immigrant from Zimbabwe that I had to educate my fellow folks from Africa was on the impact of systemic racism and how devastating it was to the African American community. So when you talked about that 60%, the number that stood out the most for me, something most people may not know. So during World War II, one of the things America used to drive the economy and to try and stabilize the economy through a process of depression was the GI Bill. But everybody qualified for the GI Bill except African Americans. So now you got everybody that went to fight the war, but the African Americans got back, but they couldn't qualify for the GI Bill. And because of that, they couldn't buy homes. And because of that, there was no generational transfer of wealth. And that was a huge pivotal moment in this country where it almost like, think of a race where everybody got to have a head start and you're standing still and you can't play catch up. So now a lot of people are wondering, well, how come African Americans aren't doing as well? That was a huge part of it that I don't think is spoken about enough in terms of that destabilize the country. So my question to you, just professional question, how do you make up for lost time for something that detrimental?
Yeah. Look, you speak to something that's really important that many people in the room will know about, but we'll also just like, let's make sure that we are all starting from the same baseline. And again, we'll be measured in this. Not all wealth that is generated is because people pull themselves up by their bootstraps and work within a fair system and get fair reward. The thing I love about the United States is the aspiration to meritocracy. Again, I grew up in a country that we don't have a written constitution in the UK, right? Hey, do you think everyone should be free? Yeah. Will you write it down? Maybe not, right? So I love, and I became an American because in the United States, we actually do pin our colors to the mast, right? And we do set this aspiration for meritocracy to create a fair society where everyone can achieve. But that is not the book that history wrote. And housing and wealth, you're right, reflect not just the GI Bill, not just redlining, not just the way that interstates were built and how they impacted communities, how they cut off access to resources for some communities while created access to resources for others. The winners and losers that have been created through structural investments made by successive governments in the US absolutely are a critical part of the reality that many communities face today. So, a few things that we need to do, as the gentleman who just spoke highlighted. One, make sure we at least are educated on it. It's important to understand the history and the structure. Why? because it might help mitigate that sense of hopelessness or helplessness that can kick in, right? If we believe that you should just be able to grind your way back and you don't take into account the ways in which you're being disadvantaged, that leads to a degree in any sentient, intelligent individual of moral trauma, burnout, and then mental health issues, which are also higher in our communities. So understanding history can at least be a basis for understanding the reality of our situation. But then empowered by that, what you can then do is say, okay, what's the option set of the things that I can engage in? And look, you cannot revert history. We can continue to fight through political representation for a set of systems and policies that enable all Americans to thrive. I don't know that we can make up for lost time, but I do know that the same challenges that push a community into a place of greater disadvantage can also forge in that community the capabilities, the determination, the skill, the brilliance, and the love to not just exceed their circumstances, but as they achieve that degree of success, to accelerate up to the top. Look, I do a lot of work with organizations. I'm going to make an analogy to what happens with professionals. Some of the most compellingly phenomenal leaders in corporate America today have come from some of the toughest journeys to get there. And there is a saying, at least in the north of England, that the way that you make a diamond is you crush coal, but it's got to get crushed. If we as a community could take the context we find ourselves in and consistently translate that into a better understanding of the circumstances, proper financial education for ourselves and our communities, and the willingness to help each other out, to genuinely build something that enables all of us to greater collective wealth. And if we can keep that going as we achieve prosperity, 10, 20 years now, you could be looking at an inverse situation. So that for me is the hope case of how we make up for lost time. But I say all of that in full deep knowledge of the real impact that history has had on the choice set and the option set that our communities face. Maybe one last thought on this, inspired by the lady in the blue jacket that spoke up. We should pull on the resources in our communities that want to drive this change. We should lean into the individuals and the institutions and the partners that are looking to drive that change. And we should find ways to collaborate. The challenges are huge, and they are historically embedded, but the commitment, the will, and the capacity of communities of color to overcome, thrive, and correct, I believe is greater. And so finding ways to come together.
Wow. I am sorry that I did not have time to ask a question. Have you all seen or heard about those families and sometimes friends that are buying acres and acres of land in the middle of the country and they're building like these compounds? So I am curious about that as a way to not maybe catch up, but to have an opportunity to, really bring that together. So what a day. Another round of applause for Annis. Thank you for that information. So I am here to wrap us up, and before I bring the powers that be up to the stage, I just wanted to take a moment to sort of reflect on the day. And we started off with Dylan, who basically told us to move. And I'm going to say not to think of self-care as selfishness, but self-preservation. How many people would like to preserve their life as much as possible? Awesome. Well, that requires that we move and that we do it with intentionality, and we think about all the things that we're putting in our body, and we celebrate the small wins on moving. We don't have to wait till Monday to go to the gym. We can just squat 10 times in the kitchen while we're waiting for the food to come out of the oven. Congratulations again, I don't think any of them are here, to our awardees, and I appreciate that we recognize them even though they don't do it for the recognition. I do think it's important and it's inspiring to see other people doing great things. Professor Tillery let us know that we can resist and press and that we must not be apathetic. Our voices do matter. You know, have you ever seen one of the rubber band balls? Some of you were too young, but on desks, people would have these rubber bands, and it was like a whole thousands and thousands of them, it looked like. And if somebody said, untangle that, you might say, ah. And I know that sometimes with the news and the things we're watching, that these things seem insurmountable, but every great action and transition came because somebody took a step. And the journey to 1,000 miles really does begin with one step. So please, again, don't be apathetic. Somebody mentioned earlier the Meet the Moment panel. Amazing conversation. We heard from leaders how they're managing this climate and that there is hope. The good things that are happening, we must stay vigilant. Yes, switch those around. We must stay vigilant again and not get apathetic. One of the things that I did want to mention, again, I run an organization called the Core Value Company, and our goal is really to help people get profound insights about themselves and to get grounded in what I'm calling their guiding principles. And the reason why I think that's important is because if we don't have a clear understanding of who we are and how we operate, it's very easy to get derailed, to get offended, to think that people are hating on you when they're really just trying to give you feedback. And you know that saying they say down south, they say a hit dog a holler. Well, one of the ways that we could start to identify where we need to do the work is where we're offended. When people say things to us and we can't seem to take the feedback, examine it. Before you even respond, before you try to figure out why they said it, is there some truth to it? And then to challenge our belief systems, to see if we have faulty beliefs that are holding us back from doing the work. When we tell ourselves that something is true, I believe we should each ask ourselves, under what circumstances might what I'm saying not be true? And once we have understanding of that, then we can start to explore new belief systems. My iPad keeps putting on the little code. That's my fault. Okay. All right. Lastly, how are we managing our minds and our mouth? What we're putting in and what we're saying has a direct reflection on what we're seeing. And so if we're not seeing the outcomes that we want, I think we take a look at the way we're thinking and the things that we're saying. And the last thing is to remember that each of us is just a breath. We have been dropped into these human bodies, and I think it is imperative that we not take too seriously the body that we were dropped in, and that we remember that we are all just breaths, and figure out how we would like to manage the human that we've been dropped into. So with that, I would like to invite up Paul Francisco and Christina Bryant. Christina is one of the leaders of the women's dinner group, and Paul Francisco is a co-leader of the men's dinner group. And thank you for having me.
I was waiting for my walk-up music. Right? You need that. Like, come on. Why were you wait for that? Right? You wait for that, right?
Christina was like, we can't walk up yet. We got walk-up music. So thank you, DJ Joe Peters. My heart is full. I hope yours is as well. This has been a wonderful day. We've heard some great insights. We've sort of laughed, we've cried, we've gone to church. We've been inspired, we've been reminded of our power. We've been reminded of where we stand, the ground that we stand on, and the trials and tribulations are here, but we also have gotten tools as to how to deal with those. And so it's been a wonderful day, and I want to thank a lot of people that made this day possible, and I'll turn it over to my colleague Christina to do that.
Absolutely. And as we close out this incredible day, We want to take that moment to express our deepest gratitude to the people that made this experience possible. To the Umass staff, thank you for welcoming us into your space and for providing excellent customer service. To Steve St. Louis Charles and the team at Boston Pro Sound, thank you for making sure every word was heard and every beat was felt. To Christian Neal of Neal Creative, your vision helped to bring this conference to life in ways that inspired and elevated. To Najib Charles, Rich Lee, and Stefan Goller from 1 Hour Party, thank you for creating an atmosphere that was both professional and joyful. To Bildad St. Louis and Sean Hope of Flair Event, your attention to detail and creativity made this space feel like a home. To our photographer, Ronald DeLorme of Graphene Media, you capture the beauty of all of our TDG gatherings, and you always get my good side. You knew that was coming. To our amazing DJs, Joe Peters and DJ Mott, thank you for keeping the energy high, the vibes flowing all day long. To the incomparable Anna Forster of A Maven's World, thank you for your leadership, your brilliance, and your unwavering commitment to excellence. Y'all, these are all minority and women-owned small businesses that we are so proud to partner with.
Thank you. So, as you know, the dinner group, we are a volunteer, ragtag bunch of folks who literally don't know what we're doing, but we try to figure it out. We get together, and there's a committee and a leadership team and group that works year-round to make sure that this conference and a number of our events come together. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank Christina Bryant, Natalie Gauthier, Connie Cabello, Sharia Wade, who couldn't be with us today, but she is part of our leadership group, my wife Betty, Francisco, who was here earlier, and obviously Anna Foster, who you heard about of Maven's group, Maven's World, rather, who helped get us organized. But there's one cat that literally we would not all be here if it wasn't for him, right? Absolutely. And M had this vision 25, 26, I can't remember, 27 years ago. And we mentioned earlier there were 4 of us sitting around a table sort of having dinner. That group continued to grow to 10, 15, 20 people. The reason why it's called the dinner group is because we wanted to create a space for convening, a space for community, a space for us to connect, brothers to connect with each other. But this cat, seriously, puts in the work to make sure that this group keeps going year after year. We have 10 chapters around the country now, and I just want to give you your flowers, bro, because you've been my Jamaican brother. So thank you to our sponsors. Without you, we would not be here. And thank you for sticking with us. We know that these times are challenging, but thank you for trusting us, thank you for believing in us, and thank you for continuing to support us. So we really, truly appreciate it. And last but not least, we have the career fair happening between now and 5 o'clock, as well as the vendors still here. So please go and support, hang out, network, and then we'll connect, hopefully, at the mixer. If you already get your tickets, then don't blame me, but you're going to hear about the mixer, yes. And then be like, man, I should have gotten that ticket. So let's put the barcode up again for the mixer. For those of you who haven't signed up, come see us at the Grand, 5 p.m., and we'll see you around. Thank you again for investing in yourself. Thank you for being here, and thank you from the dinner group for investing in yourself again, and thank you all. Appreciate it.